Elena Vale thought she was attending her engagement party until she realized she'd been sold. At 20 years old, she walked into a gilded ballroom expecting champagne and congratulations. Instead, she found a contract with her name already signed, a 40-year-old crime lord studying her like acquired property, and a father who couldn't meet her eyes. One handshake, one introduction, one night, and her entire future belonged to a man she'd never chosen, in a world she never knew existed. If you want to see how a trapped girl becomes the queen of an empire, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far Elena's story reaches across the world. The Bancroft Hotel had been built in an era when money whispered instead of shouted. Its grand ballroom dripped with understated elegance, crystal chandeliers that caught light like trapped stars, marble floors polished to mirror perfection, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's glittering skyline. Tonight, white roses climbed every column, their petals perfect and scentless, imported from somewhere exotic and expensive. Elena Vale stood at the edge of it all, her champagne flute untouched, watching her father work the room. At 20, she still possessed the kind of beauty that made people look twice. Dark hair that fell in careful waves past her shoulders, eyes the color of strong coffee, and the kind of bone structure that photographers called timeless. She wore a dress her mother had chosen, ice blue silk that caught the light when she moved and heels that made her ankles ache. Her mother had died 3 years ago. Breast cancer, swift and merciless. Elena still sometimes reached for her phone to call her before remembering. Smile, sweetheart. Her father appeared at her elbow, his own champagne already half empty. Marcus Vale had once been handsome. Now, at 53, he looked eroded, his jawline soft, his eyes carrying the particular exhaustion of a man who'd made too many bad choices and run out of ways to fix them. This is supposed to be a celebration. Of what exactly? Elena took a sip of champagne. It was excellent, which somehow made everything worse. You still haven't told me who I'm supposedly engaged to. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. You'll meet him soon enough. Dad. She turned to face him fully, keeping her voice low. I don't know anyone here except you and Aunt Diane. Half these people look like they're attending a funeral, not an engagement party, and I'm pretty sure that man by the bar has a gun under his jacket. Elena, I'm not engaged. She said it clearly, firmly, the way her mother had taught her to stand her ground. I don't have a boyfriend. I haven't been dating anyone. So what exactly are we celebrating? Marcus's hand tightened on his glass. For just a moment, Elena saw something flicker across his face, shame, maybe, or fear, or both tangled together until they were indistinguishable. We'll talk about this later. We'll talk about it now, or I'm leaving. You can't leave. The words came out too quickly, too desperately. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why not? Before Marcus could answer, the room's energy shifted. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they changed, became quieter, more careful. People turned toward the entrance, their movement subtle, but unmistakable. A man walked in. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with the kind of presence that made the vast ballroom feel suddenly smaller. Dark hair silvered at the temples, sharp features that suggested northern Italian heritage, and a suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. He moved with the absolute confidence of a man who'd never had to prove himself, because everyone already knew exactly who he was. 40, Elena guessed. Maybe 42. Old enough that the lines around his eyes spoke of experience, young enough that his shoulders were still broad and his movements fluid. And when his gaze found hers across the room, Elena felt the world tilt sideways. He studied her the way an art collector might study a painting before purchase, thorough, analytical, assessing value and authenticity. Not with desire exactly, with consideration. Marcus's hand closed around Elena's arm. Come on. Dad? Not now. He pulled her forward, weaving through clusters of guests who parted like water around them. Elena's heels clicked against marble as she struggled to keep up, champagne sloshing in her glass. The man waited for them. Up close, he was even more imposing, not because of his size, though he was certainly substantial, but because of the absolute stillness he carried. Most people fidgeted, shifted their weight, performed tiny movements that betrayed their thoughts. This man could have been carved from stone. Mr. Romano. Marcus's voice had changed, taken on a note Elena had never heard before. Deference. Fear. May I present my daughter, Elena? Elena's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the marble with a sound like breaking bones, golden liquid spreading across the perfect floor. A server appeared instantly with a towel, murmuring apologies as if the glass had jumped from Elena's hand of its own accord. She barely noticed. "Romano," she repeated, her voice hollow. "Victor Romano." Even sheltered, even naive, Elena wasn't ignorant. Victor Romano was a name that appeared in newspapers, usually in articles about organized crime, money laundering, and federal investigations that mysteriously stalled before reaching trial. The heir to the Romano Empire, a network of legitimate businesses that allegedly masked something far darker underneath. A criminal, a monster in an expensive suit, and her father had just introduced him like they were meeting for dinner. Victor extended his hand. "Miss Vale." His voice matched everything else about him, controlled, measured, carrying weight without volume. Elena stared at his hand like it might burn her. "Shake his hand, sweetheart." Marcus's grip tightened on her arm, hard enough to bruise. "Don't be rude." Elena's hand moved before her brain caught up. Victor's grip was warm, firm, and lasted exactly 3 seconds before he released her. "Your father has told me a great deal about you," Victor said. "You recently graduated from state, psychology, with a focus on counseling. How do you—" Elena stopped, looked at her father. "What's happening?" "Perhaps we should speak somewhere more private." Victor gestured toward a side door. "The library is available. I'm not going anywhere with you." "Elena," Marcus's voice cracked. "Please." There was something in his tone that made Elena's throat tight. Her father was many things, distant since her mother died, increasingly absent, secretive about his business dealings, but she'd never heard him beg before. She looked at Victor Romano. 5 minutes. That's all I need." The library was smaller than the ballroom, but no less elegant, lined with leather-bound volumes that probably no one ever read. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild evening, casting dancing shadows across Persian rugs and furniture that belonged in a museum. Victor closed the door behind them with a soft click. Marcus started talking immediately. "Elena, I need you to understand. Mr. Vale," Victor's voice cut through like a blade. "Give us a moment." It wasn't a request. Marcus actually flinched, then retreated to the far corner of the room like a scolded child. Elena watched her father shrink and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of reality. Victor moved to the sideboard and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. Bourbon, Elena thought, though she'd never developed a taste for it. He handed her 1 glass, kept the other for himself, and settled into a leather armchair with the ease of a man entirely comfortable with silence. "Sit," he said. "I'll stand. You're wearing heels that are already hurting your feet." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, Miss Vale. This conversation will be difficult enough without you trying to prove something by standing." Elena sat, mostly because he was right about the heels. "Your father owes me money," Victor said without preamble. "Quite a substantial amount, actually. $8 million, plus interest accruing at rates that would make a loan shark blush." The number hit Elena like a physical blow. 8? That's not possible." "It's very possible. Mr. Vale made several unfortunate investments following your mother's death. When those failed, he borrowed to cover the losses. When he couldn't repay, he borrowed more. Eventually, he borrowed from people who don't accept excuses or payment plans." Elena looked at her father. Marcus was staring at the floor, his shoulders hunched, looking decades older than he had an hour ago. "I don't understand what this has to do with me," Elena said, though some terrified part of her already knew. Victor took a sip of bourbon. "Your father offered you as collateral." The room spun. Elena's hand tightened on her glass, the crystal pressing sharp edges into her palm. "Excuse me?" 3 months ago, Marcus came to me desperate. The people he owed were threatening his life. He begged for protection, for time, for mercy. I explained that I don't extend credit without equivalent security. Victor's dark eyes never left Elena's face. "He offered his daughter." "You're lying." "I don't lie, Miss Vale. Lies are inefficient and ultimately unsustainable." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded document. "This is a contract, signed by your father 6 weeks ago. It stipulates that in exchange for eliminating his debt and ensuring his safety, Marcus Vale agrees to a marriage arrangement between his daughter and myself." Elena couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to be closing in, the fire suddenly too hot, the air too thin. "Marriage," she whispered. "I require legitimacy." Victor said, as calmly as if discussing the weather. My businesses are expanding into sectors that demand a particular image. A wife provides that. A young, educated, respectable wife suggests stability, domesticity, a man interested in building a family legacy rather than a criminal empire. You want to use me? Yes. The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. Elena turned to her father. Tell me he's lying. Tell me you didn't... I'm sorry. Marcus's voice broke. Elena, I'm so sorry, but they were going to kill me. They were going to... So you sold me? I protected you. He moved toward her, hands outstretched. Elena, please, you have to understand. Victor Romano isn't like the others. He doesn't hurt women. He keeps his word. You'll be safe with him. You'll be... Safe? Elena's laugh came out harsh, broken. You just traded me to a criminal like I'm livestock and you're telling me I'll be safe? Miss Vale, Victor's voice cut through her rising hysteria. I understand you're distressed. That's reasonable. But before you make any decisions, I suggest you hear the terms of the arrangement. There are no terms. I'm a person, not a... Everyone is a commodity in the right context. Victor set down his glass with a soft clink. The question is whether you want to be traded without agency or whether you want to negotiate the terms of your own sale. Elena stared at him. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. There's a difference. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense but not unkind. Your father's debt exists whether you acknowledge it or not. The Menios are not patient, nor are they merciful. If I withdraw my protection, Marcus will be dead within a week. Probably Mesley. That's not my problem. Isn't it? Victor tilted his head. He's your father, your only living parent. You may be angry, you should be angry, but I don't believe you're heartless enough to let him die. Elena wanted to argue, to insist she could absolutely let Marcus reap what he'd sown, but the words caught in her throat because Victor was right. Despite everything, despite this betrayal, she couldn't just let her father die. Victor seemed to read her silence accurately. So the question becomes, what do you want from this transaction? I want to go home and pretend this never happened. Not an option I'm willing to provide. Elena's hands were shaking. She set down her bourbon before she dropped it. You can't force me to marry you. Legally, you're correct. Practically, you'll find your options are more limited than you'd prefer. Victor stood, moving to the window. His silhouette was sharp against the city lights. I don't want an unwilling bride, Miss Vale. That serves neither of us. What I want is a partner who understands the parameters of our arrangement and chooses to proceed anyway. Why would I ever choose this? He turned back to her. Because I'm offering you more than your father ever could. Before Elena could respond, Victor continued, his tone matter of fact. If you agree to this marriage, you will have your own bank account with immediate access to $2 million. You will have legal representation independent of my attorneys, paid for by me but loyal only to you. You will have a prenuptial agreement guaranteeing you $10 million should the marriage end for any reason except infidelity on your part. Elena's breath caught. You will have your own residence within my property, separate quarters if you prefer. You will have security, transportation, and staff answerable to you. You will be free to pursue your education, your career, your interests. The only requirements are that you appear at my side for specific public events and that you maintain the appearance of a genuine marriage. That's all? Elena's voice dripped sarcasm. Just sell my soul and play pretend? I never mentioned your soul. That remains entirely your own. Victor returned to his chair. I'm offering you a business arrangement, Miss Vale, one that ensures your father's safety, provides you with financial independence, and allows you to maintain autonomy within clearly defined boundaries. And if I say no, then your father dies, you lose whatever inheritance he might have left, and you return to your small apartment and your retail job wondering if you could have saved him. Victor's gaze was steady. I won't force you, Elena, but I also won't pretend you have better options. The use of her first name felt deliberately intimate, a reminder that this man had studied her, knew about her life in ways that should have been private. How long? Elena heard herself ask. Minimum 3 years. After that, we can renegotiate or part ways as agreed in the prenuptial. 3 years of my life. 3 years of security, wealth, and protection. Many people would consider that a reasonable trade. Many people are idiots. Victor's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Perhaps. But they're idiots with full bank accounts and living fathers. Elena looked at Marcus, still cowering in the corner. Part of her hated him with an intensity that frightened her. Another part recognized the broken man her father had become after her mother's death, making increasingly desperate choices until he'd cornered himself completely. Can I think about it? You have until tomorrow evening, Victor said. After that, I withdraw my offer and your father will need to face his creditors alone. That's less than 24 hours. Correct. I don't believe additional time will change the fundamental calculation, merely delay the inevitable decision. Elena stood on shaking legs. I need air. The balcony is through those doors, Victor gestured. Take whatever time you need. I'll wait. She fled. The balcony overlooked the city, millions of lights stretching to the horizon, each one representing someone living their normal life, unaware that Elena Vale's entire existence had just been auctioned off like a prized mare. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. Elena gripped the railing until her knuckles went white, trying to process what had just happened. 20 minutes ago, she'd been annoyed about a mysterious engagement party. Now she was contemplating marrying a 40-year-old crime lord to save her father's life. The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Miss Vale? Elena spun. A woman stood in the balcony doorway, 60-something, elegant in gray silk, with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled into a perfect chignon. I'm Diane Castellano, the woman said. Your mother's sister. Aunt Diane. Elena had seen her earlier in the ballroom, but hadn't managed to speak with her yet. Did Dad send you to convince me? Your father is currently drinking himself into unconsciousness, which is his preferred method of handling guilt. Diane stepped onto the balcony, closing the door behind her. I came because I want you to understand what you're actually considering. I understand perfectly. I'm being sold like property. Yes. Diane's bluntness was almost refreshing. But you're being sold to Victor Romano, which matters more than you realize. Elena turned back to the railing. He's a criminal. He's the head of one of the most powerful organizations on the East Coast. There's a difference. Not one that makes me feel better about this. Diane moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at the glittering city. I knew Victor's father. Salvatore Romano was old school, brutal, traditional, deeply unpleasant to anyone he considered beneath him, which was essentially everyone. When he died 5 years ago, people expected Victor to be worse. And? He's not. He's calculating where his father was emotional, strategic where Salvatore was violent. Victor has spent the last 5 years transforming the Romano Empire into something that operates in the gray spaces between legal and illegal. Diane paused. I'm not saying he's a good man, but he's not the monster his father was. You want me to marry him? I want you to understand that if you must marry someone for reasons beyond your control, and it appears you must, Victor Romano is possibly the least terrible option. Elena laughed bitterly. That's a ringing endorsement. It's an honest one. Diane's hand covered Elena's on the railing. Your mother was my baby sister. If I thought Victor would hurt you, I would burn this entire building down before I let you near him. But I've watched him, Elena. I've made it my business to know everything about the man who might marry into my family. And? He keeps his word. He protects what's his. And he doesn't tolerate anyone who harms women or children. There are rumors that he's had his own people killed for crossing that line. Diane squeezed Elena's hand. You could do much worse. I could also just run away. Where? Your father's creditors will find you, and when they can't use you as leverage against Marcus, they'll kill you just to send a message. Diane's voice was gentle but firm. You're trapped, sweetheart. The only choice you have is how you handle the trap. Elena closed her eyes. I don't want this. I know. I wanted to finish my degree, get my counseling license. Maybe work with kids who've lost parents, help them process grief the way I never really did. You can still do all of that. Victor's offer includes continuing your education. While playing mob wife on weekends? While building a life within the constraints you've been given. Diane turned to Elena to face her. You're your mother's daughter. She was stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and she taught you to be strong too. Don't let your father's mistakes destroy the future you could still have. A future as Victor Romano's wife. A future as a woman with resources, protection, and the opportunity to become someone powerful in her own right. Diane's eyes were fierce. You think being married to Victor means being weak? Elena, you could become the most influential woman in this city if you play it right. I don't want to play anything. Then you'll lose everything. Diane stepped back. It's your choice. Stay trapped in your anger and lose, or adapt to the reality you've been given and turn it into something you can live with. She left Elena alone on the balcony. The city lights blurred through sudden tears. Elena swiped at her eyes angrily, refusing to cry, refusing to break down when someone might see. Inside the library, Victor Romano waited, patient, calculating, offering her a cage gilded with money and promises. Her father had put her here, her weak, desperate, broken father who'd gambled away $8 million and then gambled away his daughter to cover the debt. Elena should hate him. Part of her did. But another part, the part that remembered him reading her bedtime stories, teaching her to ride a bike, crying at her mother's funeral like his heart was breaking, that part couldn't quite let go. She returned to the library. Victor stood as she entered, reading her decision in her posture before she spoke a word. "I have conditions," Elena said. "Of course. My own lawyer. Not someone you choose, someone I find independently." "Agreed. Access to my bank account immediately. Not after the wedding, not after some waiting period. Tomorrow." "Easily arranged. If you ever hit me, threaten me, or force yourself on me, the deal is void, and I keep the money." "I would never do any of those things, but yes, we'll include that language in the prenuptial." Victor's expression remained neutral. "Is there anything else?" Elena looked at her father, who'd raised his head with desperate hope in his eyes. "My father gets no access to my money, ever. And if he tries to gamble again, you stop protecting him." Marcus flinched. "Elena, those are my terms." She turned back to Victor. "Do you accept?" "Yes." "Then I'll marry you." The words came out steadier than she felt. Victor extended his hand, not for a handshake this time, but palm up, an offering rather than a demand. Elena placed her hand in his. "Tomorrow evening," Victor said, "my attorney will contact you to begin paperwork. The wedding will be in 4 weeks." 4 weeks? Elena's voice cracked. "That's sufficient time to arrange a ceremony appropriate to both our needs and minimal enough that you won't spend months dreading the inevitable." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture that might have been comforting if the circumstances weren't insane. "You've made a brave choice, Elena." I made the only choice I had." "Perhaps, but you made it standing up rather than falling apart. That matters." He released her hand and moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "I'll have a car take you home tonight. Tomorrow, a security detail will be assigned to you. You may find their presence intrusive, but it's non-negotiable." "Why would I need security?" "Because as of this moment, you're associated with me. That makes you valuable and vulnerable." Victor's dark eyes held hers. "I protect what's mine, Elena. Get used to it." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with her father. Marcus approached cautiously, like she might bolt or attack. "Elena, Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't apologize, don't explain, don't try to make this better. You sold me. That's what happened here. You sold your daughter to save yourself." "I was desperate. Everyone is desperate about something. Not everyone trades their child to fix it." Elena grabbed her clutch from the side table, her movements sharp and angry. "I'm going home. Don't call me unless it's an emergency." "When will I see you?" "At the wedding, I guess, since that's apparently happening now." She left him there, alone with his guilt and his bourbon. The ballroom had emptied while she'd been in the library. Only staff remained, cleaning up the remnants of a party celebrating an engagement that was really a transaction, witnessed by people who understood exactly what they were watching. Victor stood near the entrance, speaking quietly with a man who looked like he ate broken glass for breakfast. Both turned as Elena approached. "Miss Vale," Victor gestured to his companion. "This is Marcus Chen, head of my security. He'll ensure you get home safely tonight." Marcus Chen was shorter than Victor, but somehow seemed to take up more space, compact, muscular, with a face that suggested he'd seen violence up close and hadn't blinked. He nodded curtly at Elena. "Miss Vale, car's out front whenever you're ready." "I'm ready now." The drive home took 30 minutes. Chen drove in silence, occasionally checking mirrors with the practiced attention of someone expecting trouble. Elena stared out the window, watching the city blur past, trying to reconcile this strange new reality with the life she'd been living just hours ago. Her apartment was a modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood that her mother would have called up-and-coming and her father had called questionable. Elena had loved it, her first place on her own, decorated with thrift store finds and plants she kept alive through sheer determination. Chen walked her to the door, checked the interior despite her protests, and left her with a card containing a phone number. "You need anything? Anything at all? You call that number," he said. "Someone will answer 24/7. Then Elena was alone. She locked the door, set her clutch on the counter, and looked around at her small, imperfect, beloved apartment. In 4 weeks, this wouldn't be her life anymore. She'd be Elena Romano, wife to a crime lord, living in some mansion with staff and security, and a husband who'd purchased her like a Picasso. Elena made it to the bathroom before she started crying. She cried for her mother, who'd never have let this happen. For her father, who'd become someone she didn't recognize. For the future she'd imagined. Helping kids process trauma. Maybe opening her own practice someday. Finding love on her own terms. She cried until she was empty. Then she washed her face, changed into pajamas, and opened her laptop. If she was going to marry Victor Romano, she was damn well going to know exactly who he was. The internet offered plenty. News articles about federal investigations that stalled mysteriously. Society page photos of Victor at charity galas, always alone or with business associates, never with a date. Business filings showing a dizzying network of companies. Construction, waste management, import/export, real estate. Nothing explicitly criminal. Everything vaguely suspicious. Elena dug deeper, finding academic papers analyzing organized crime structures. Forum posts from people claiming insider knowledge. Court transcripts from cases that had been dismissed or settled. A pattern emerged. Victor Romano was ruthless in business, generous to charities, and absolutely terrifying to his enemies. People who crossed him tended to lose everything. Businesses bankrupted, reputations destroyed, occasional mysterious disappearances. But nothing about violence against women. Nothing about drugs or human trafficking. In fact, several articles mentioned Romano's strict prohibition against those activities within his organization. Pragmatic, Elena murmured, remembering how he'd described himself. Not moral, just selective about which lines to cross. She found a photo from 5 years ago, Victor standing beside an older man at some formal event. The caption identified the older man as Salvatore Romano, Victor's father. Where Victor was controlled and precise, Salvatore had been all sharp edges and cruel eyes. Elena studied Victor's expression in the photo. No warmth toward his father, barely any emotion at all, just that same calculating stillness she'd seen tonight. What made someone like that? What kind of life produced a man who could offer marriage terms like a business proposal and mean every word without malice or passion? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Vale. "This is Catherine Walsh, attorney with Walsh & Associates. Victor Romano has retained me to represent your interests in the prenuptial agreement. I'm available to meet at your convenience tomorrow. Please let me know what time works best. C. W." Elena stared at the text. Part of her had hoped Victor might change his mind overnight, that she'd wake up and discover this was all some stress-induced nightmare. Instead, here was a lawyer, ready to negotiate the terms of her sale. She typed back, 10 a.m., coffee shop on 3rd and Madison. The response came immediately. "I'll be there. Looking forward to meeting you." Elena set down her phone and returned to her research. If she was being sold, she'd at least know exactly what she was worth. Opening, the transaction. Disguised as a celebration. At just 20, Elena Vale believes she is attending an elegant engagement party until she realizes she has been traded. Her powerful father, drowning in hidden debts, has promised her hand to Victor Romano, a 40-year-old underworld titan seeking legitimacy. Elena meets Victor only once before the deal is sealed. She feels stripped of choice, youth, and identity, forced into a future she never agreed to. Rising action. From captive to calculated choice. Expecting cruelty, Elena instead encounters a man who is controlled, terrifyingly honest, and strategic. Victor sets strict boundaries, but also offers legal protections, financial independence, and a way out if he ever becomes abusive. He does not demand obedience. He offers partnership. Elena begins to see that while the marriage began as coercion, the power dynamic is quietly shifting. Climax. The first test of power. When Victor is absent and enemies probe his territory, Elena steps into the void. Using intelligence rather than force, she diffuses a direct threat, proving she is no longer a liability. When Victor returns, he does not praise her beauty, but her judgment. In that moment, Elena stops being a bargaining chip and becomes an equal force at his side. Resolution. Love forged through choice, not fear. On the eve of their wedding, away from public eyes, Elena freely chooses Victor. They exchange private vows rooted in loyalty, truth, and shared destiny. Their union is sealed not by obligation, but by mutual recognition, two strategists standing together. When enemies strike on their wedding night, they respond as one, dismantling the threat with precision, breakthrough and ending. The rise of the Queen. Elena fully steps into her role as Victor's partner, strategist, protector, and equal. She confronts her father, reclaims her autonomy, and helps dismantle rival powers from within. The girl who was sold disappears. In her place stands a woman who chose power, love, and control on her own terms. The story ends with their empire stabilized, their bond unbreakable, and Elena no longer trapped, but reigning. Bạn là một người kể chuyện và biên kịch chuyên nghiệp. Dựa trên dàn ý dữ liệu trên, hãy viết câu chuyện trên thành 5 phần và viết lại theo phong cách trên để câu chuyện hay hơn và kịch tính hơn, phù hợp cho phần lồng tiếng YouTube dài 2 tiếng. Bắt đầu ngay part 1, viết một phần mở đầu dài 100 từ với tình huống kịch tính nhất. Mở đầu bằng một hook thật mạnh mẽ. Giữ chân người xem. Ngay lập tức tiết lộ xung đột với tiêu đề. Sau đó chúng tôi mời khán giả theo dõi câu chuyện của tôi đến cuối nhận thích và bình luận về thành phố bạn đang xem để tôi có thể xem câu chuyện của mình đã đi được bao xa. Sau đó viết phần 1, 6.500 đến 7.000 từ bằng tiếng Anh phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc, liên lạc nội dung với các phần tiếp theo và kết cấu câu chuyện. Tăng hồi thoại để tăng kịch tính cho câu chuyện, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, viết hoàn toàn bằng tiếng Anh. Kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa, lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chỉ dần bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Showmore 1132 Hook, 100 words. The contract had already been signed before Elena Vale even knew she was for sale. At 20 years old, she walked into what she thought was her engagement party, only to discover the groom had been chosen without her knowledge. The deal struck without her consent, and her entire future sold to pay her father's debts. Victor Romano, 40 years old, dangerously powerful, and terrifyingly calm, studied her like recently acquired property. One meeting, one night. One choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Stay until the end to see how a transaction becomes a throne. Hit like and comment your city. Let's see how far Elena's story travels. Part 1. The morning after the engagement party that wasn't really an engagement party, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the desperate hope that everything had been a nightmare. Then she saw the business card on her nightstand, Catherine Walsh, attorney at law, and remembered. Her father had sold her, Victor Romano had bought her, and she'd agreed to it. Elena lay staring at the ceiling, cataloging the ways her life had imploded in a single evening. 20 years old with the psychology degree she'd barely started using, working retail at an upscale boutique while she saved for graduate school, living in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. Normal, safe, hers. In 4 weeks, none of that would exist. Her phone showed 8:47 a.m. The meeting with the lawyer was at 10. Elena dragged herself out of bed and into the shower, letting hot water pound against her shoulders while she tried to organize her thoughts into something resembling coherence. The facts were simple, even if they were insane. Her father owed $8 million to people who would kill him if he didn't pay. Victor Romano had offered to clear the debt in exchange for marriage. Elena had agreed because the alternative was watching her father die. She had 4 weeks until the wedding and 3 years minimum in the marriage. After that, if she survived with her sanity intact, she'd be 23 years old and $10 million richer. Elena turned off the water and studied herself in the foggy mirror. Dark hair plastered to her skull, face bare of makeup, eyes that looked older than they had yesterday. She barely recognized herself. "You can do this," she told her reflection. 3 years. You've survived worse. Except she hadn't, really. The worst thing that had ever happened to her was her mother's death, and that had nearly broken her. This felt like a different kind of death, the death of the future she'd imagined, replaced by something she couldn't quite comprehend yet. Elena dressed carefully, jeans, a sweater, boots that were comfortable enough for a long walk if she needed to clear her head afterward. She pulled her hair into a ponytail and applied minimal makeup, armor, her mother used to call it. The face you showed the world when you needed to be strong. The coffee shop on 3rd and Madison was one of those aggressively trendy places with exposed brick, mismatched furniture, and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. Elena ordered a latte she didn't want and claimed a table in the corner where she could watch the door. Catherine Walsh arrived exactly at 10. She was nothing like Elena expected. Mid-40s, dressed in a sharp navy suit that screamed expensive, with red hair pulled into a sleek bun and the kind of presence that made people move out of her way without realizing they were doing it. She spotted Elena immediately and crossed the coffee shop with purposeful strides. "Miss Vale?" Catherine extended her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Elena shook it. "Did I have a choice?" "You always have choices. They're not always good ones, but they exist." Catherine settled into the chair across from Elena and pulled out a tablet. "I've reviewed the preliminary agreement Mr. Romano's attorneys drafted. Before we discuss specifics, I need to understand your priorities." "My priorities?" "What matters most to you in this arrangement? Financial security, personal freedom, exit strategies? I can't negotiate effectively unless I know what you actually want." Elena wrapped her hands around her latte. "I want to not be in this situation at all. Understandable, but not actionable." Catherine's green eyes were sympathetic but firm. "Give me something I can work with." "I don't want to be trapped. I don't want to feel like I'm in prison for 3 years." "Good. What else?" "I want control over my own money. My father doesn't get to touch it, and Victor can't use it as leverage against me." "Excellent. Continue." Elena thought about the previous night, about Victor's calm recitation of terms like he was negotiating a real estate deal. "I want legal protection, not just promises, actual legal consequences if he hurts me or forces me into anything I don't agree to. We'll include specific language about abuse, coercion, and consent. What about children?" The question hit Elena like ice water. What about them? "Does Mr. Romano expect you to have children? Do you want children? We need to clarify expectations now, not 2 years into a marriage when it becomes a point of conflict." Elena hadn't even thought that far ahead. "I don't know, I'm 20. I haven't planned that part of my life." "Then we'll stipulate that any decisions regarding children must be mutual and consensual, with no pressure or coercion from either party." Catherine made notes on her tablet. "What about infidelity?" "What about it?" "The preliminary agreement includes a clause voiding your financial settlement if you commit infidelity. Is that acceptable to you?" Elena's laugh came out bitter. "He's buying a wife to make himself look legitimate. I don't think he cares if I'm faithful as long as I don't embarrass him publicly." Actually, Mr. Romano was quite specific about fidelity requirements, for both parties. Catherine pulled up a document on her tablet and turned it toward Elena. "He's offering a mutual fidelity clause. If either of you engages in extramarital affairs during the marriage, the injured party receives an additional $5 million and the immediate right to divorce." Elena read the clause twice, certain she was misunderstanding. "He's agreeing not to cheat?" "Apparently. It's unusual but not unprecedented." Catherine reclaimed her tablet. "It suggests he's serious about the appearance of a genuine marriage. Or he just doesn't want to pay an extra $5 million. Also possible. Either way, it works in your favor." They spent the next hour going through the agreement line by line. Catherine explained terms, identified potential problems, and made notes about changes to request. The woman was ruthlessly competent, asking questions Elena wouldn't have thought to consider. "What about social obligations?" Catherine asked. "How many events is he expecting you to attend?" "He mentioned specific public events. He didn't quantify it." "Then we'll define it. Maximum 2 events per month requiring your attendance with reasonable notice. You maintain the right to decline if you're ill or have prior commitments that can't be rescheduled." "He'll agree to that?" "If he won't, we'll negotiate. That's what I'm here for." Catherine made another note. "What about your career and education?" "He said I could continue both." "Then we'll stipulate it. You maintain the right to pursue education and employment without interference, including the right to work in fields that might create conflicts of interest with his businesses." Elena frowned. "Why would that matter?" "Because if you decide to become a prosecutor or work for a law enforcement agency, Mr. Romano might find that problematic given his business interests. We need to establish now that your career choices are your own." The casual acknowledgement of Victor's criminal activities should have shocked Elena. Instead, it just felt like confirmation of what she already knew. "Miss Walsh," "Catherine, please." Catherine, can I ask you something? Of course. Elena chose her words carefully. Why are you helping me? Victor is paying you, but you're acting like you're on my side. I am on your side. That's exactly what Mr. Romano is paying me for. Catherine set down her tablet and met Elena's eyes directly. He was very clear when he retained me. My job is to protect your interests, even if that means negotiating against him. Especially if that means negotiating against him. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense if you understand what he actually wants. Catherine leaned back in her chair. Victor Romano could have forced this marriage without offering you anything. Your father's debt gave him that leverage. Instead, he's offering you money, independence, and legal protections. Why do you think that is? Elena had spent half the night wondering the same thing. He said he wants legitimacy, a real-looking marriage. Partially, but I think it's more than that. Catherine's expression grew thoughtful. I've dealt with powerful men my entire career. Most of them want obedience. They want a wife who smiles and nods and never causes problems. But Mr. Romano specifically requested that I ensure you have the resources to fight him if necessary. Maybe he's just covering his bases legally. Maybe. Or maybe he actually wants a partner instead of a possession. Catherine shrugged. Either way, my job is to make sure you're protected. So let's keep going. They worked through lunch. Catherine ordered sandwiches and they ate while discussing asset division, property rights, and what would happen if Victor died before the 3-year minimum expired. Wait, Elena set down her sandwich. If he dies, I still get the money? Not just the money. You inherit a percentage of his estate based on length of marriage. 1 year or less, 10%. 2 years, 20%. 3 or more years, 30%. Catherine pulled up another document. His attorneys tried to cap it at $5 million regardless of estate value. I'm going to push for removal of the cap. How much is his estate worth? Difficult to say precisely given the complexity of his holdings, but conservatively, $200 million? Possibly substantially more. Elena choked on her coffee. $200 million, yes, which means 30% uncapped could be $60 million or more if you stay married the full 3 years and he dies. Catherine smiled slightly. Suddenly, this arrangement looks a bit more interesting, doesn't it? Or it makes me a target for anyone who wants his money. True. Which is why you'll have security. That's non-negotiable on his end. They finished at 3 in the afternoon. Elena's head was spinning with clauses and contingencies and numbers that didn't seem real. What happens now? She asked as Catherine packed up her tablet. I send the revised agreement to Mr. Romano's attorneys. They'll probably push back on some items. We'll negotiate. This will go back and forth for a week or two until we reach terms both parties can accept. And then? Then you sign, he signs, and 4 weeks from Saturday you become Mrs. Elena Romano. Catherine's expression softened slightly. How are you holding up? I don't know. I feel like I'm planning my own execution. Or planning the biggest power move of your life. Perspective matters. Catherine stood and handed Elena a folder. This contains copies of everything we discussed, my contact information, and a list of resources you might find useful. Therapists specializing in complicated family dynamics. Financial advisor who can help you understand wealth management. Self-defense instructor, because you should know how to protect yourself regardless of security details. Elena took the folder numbly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't finished negotiating. Catherine's smile was sharp. But we will. And when we're done, you'll be in the strongest position possible, given the circumstances. After Catherine left, Elena sat in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at the folder and trying to process everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Miss Vale. Marcus Chen. Mr. Romano requested I check in. Everything all right? Elena almost laughed. She'd been sold into marriage yesterday, spent this morning negotiating the terms of her own purchase, and Victor's head of security was asking if everything was all right. She typed back, define all right. The response came quickly. Fair point. You need anything? No, thank you. Copy that. Number's in your phone now. Use it if you need it. Elena added Chen's contact information and put her phone away. The security aspect was going to take some getting used to. The idea that someone was always watching, always available, always there, whether she wanted them or not. She walked home slowly, taking the long route through the park where she and her mother used to feed ducks on Sunday afternoons. The trees were starting to bud, spring asserting itself after a harsh winter. In 4 weeks, everything would be different. Elena's apartment felt smaller when she returned. She looked around at her secondhand furniture, her collection of psychology textbooks, the photos of her mother scattered on every surface. What would she take to Victor's house? What would she leave behind? Her phone rang. Her father. Elena stared at the screen, finger hovering over the decline button. She should ignore him, should let him stew in his guilt and his consequences. She answered. Elena. Marcus's voice was rough, like he'd been crying or drinking or both. Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. What do you want? I wanted to explain. There's nothing to explain. You owed money you couldn't pay. You traded me to save yourself. That's the entire story. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Elena walked to her window, looking out at the street below. You could have come to me. Could have told me about the debt, asked for help finding another solution. Instead, you sold me like property to a man I'd never met. Victor Romano isn't like you think. He's a criminal. He's a criminal, Dad. And now I'm going to marry him because you couldn't stop gambling after Mom died. The silence on the other end was heavy. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Marcus finally said. I know I destroyed any trust you had in me. But Elena, I am sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me my life back. I know. His voice broke. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. You can't make it right. That's not possible anymore. Elena closed her eyes. The best you can do is stay away from me. Don't gamble. Don't get into more debt. Don't make me regret saving your life. Elena, I have to go. The lawyer needs some documents from me. She hung up before he could respond. The rest of the week passed in a strange blur. Catherine called daily with updates on the negotiation. Victor's attorneys pushed back on the asset division. Catherine pushed harder. They tried to limit Elena's career freedom. Catherine threatened to walk away from the entire deal. They wanted monthly public appearances. Catherine got it down to 2 events maximum, with 2 weeks' notice minimum. Elena didn't hear from Victor directly, just updates filtered through attorneys, like she was negotiating with a corporation rather than a person. On Thursday, Catherine called with news. We have an agreement, she said without preamble. Everything we discussed, plus a few additional protections I managed to squeeze in. You should review it carefully before signing, but I believe this is as good as we're going to get. What additional protections? Right to maintain separate residence even after marriage. Right to travel independently with reasonable notice. And, this was a surprise, Victor added a clause guaranteeing you receive your full settlement even if you choose to end the marriage before 3 years for mental health reasons. Elena sat down hard on her couch. He added that himself? His attorneys presented it as his suggestion, yes. The language is very specific. If remaining in the marriage threatens your psychological well-being, you can leave with full financial settlement and no penalties. Why would he do that? I have no idea, but it's extraordinarily generous given the leverage he holds. Catherine paused. Elena, I'm going to say something that might be overstepping, but I think you need to hear it. Okay? Whatever Victor Romano is, and he's certainly not a saint, he's treating this arrangement with far more respect than most men in his position would show. I've seen powerful men use prenuptial agreements as weapons. This isn't that. This is surprisingly equitable. You sound like you approve of him. I don't approve of how you ended up in this situation, but I do think you could have ended up with someone much worse. Catherine's tone softened. The question is, can you live with this? Elena looked around her small apartment, thought about her retail job and her student loans and her dream of becoming a therapist someday. Then she thought about $2 million in her bank account, about resources to finish her education without debt, about security and protection and the strange sense that Victor Romano, criminal, strategist, purchaser of unwilling brides, was offering her something her own father never had. Choice. Not free choice, not the choice she would have made if the world were fair, but choice nonetheless. Yes, Elena said, I can live with it. Then I'll prepare the final documents for signature. Plan on coming to my office tomorrow at 2. Bring identification and be prepared to spend an hour signing paperwork. Will Victor be there? No, he'll sign separately. You won't see him again until the wedding unless you request otherwise. Elena wasn't sure whether that was a relief or a disappointment. Friday afternoon, she signed her name 47 times on documents that would legally bind her to a man she'd met once. Catherine witnessed each signature, her own expression carefully neutral. "It's done," Catherine said when the last document was signed. "You're officially engaged to Victor Romano. The marriage ceremony is scheduled for 4 weeks from tomorrow at his private estate." "Private estate? Of course he has a private estate." Elena's laugh sounded slightly hysterical, even to her own ears. 15 acres in Westchester. The ceremony will be small, immediate family only, per your request." Elena had requested that because her family consisted of her father, who she could barely look at, and Aunt Diane, who at least seemed honest about what was happening. The idea of a big wedding with hundreds of strangers watching felt obscene. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now you go home, continue your normal life as much as possible, and prepare for the wedding. I'll coordinate with Victor's people on logistics. You'll receive an itinerary next week." Catherine hesitated. "There's one more thing." "What?" "Victor requested permission to send you something. Not a gift exactly. More of a gesture of good faith. I told him I'd ask before he proceeded." "What kind of gesture?" "He didn't specify. Said you'd understand when you received it." Catherine's expression suggested she found this as cryptic as Elena did. "You can decline if you prefer." Elena considered. Part of her wanted to refuse out of spite, to maintain some small illusion of control. But another part, the part that had spent a week learning just how carefully Victor had structured their agreement to protect her, was curious. "Okay," she said. "He can send it. I'll let him know." That evening, Elena returned home to find Marcus Chen waiting outside her building. "Miss Vale," he nodded in greeting. "Got something for you?" He handed her an envelope. Heavy paper, expensive. Her name written on the front in elegant script. Elena opened it. Inside was a key, old-fashioned, brass, the kind that belonged to a door that had existed for decades, and a note in the same elegant handwriting. "Elena, this is the key to the east wing of the estate. Those rooms are yours, exclusively. I will not enter without your explicit permission. They can be your refuge when you need distance from the rest of the house, or from me. The wing includes a library, study, bedroom suite, and private garden. Decorate however you wish. Change anything you want. It's yours for as long as you want it. I know this doesn't make our arrangement less difficult, but I hope it makes it more bearable." Elena stared at the key in her palm. It was warm from Chen's pocket, solid and real. "There's more," Chen said quietly. He handed her a tablet. "Photos of the wing. Boss thought you might want to see it before the wedding." Elena scrolled through the images. The east wing was beautiful. All hardwood floors and tall windows and built-in bookshelves that stretched to vaulted ceilings. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment, with a fireplace and French doors opening onto a terrace. The garden was walled, private, filled with roses that wouldn't bloom for another month. It was a cage, but it was a beautiful cage. "Thank you," Elena told Chen. Tell him I appreciate it." Chen nodded and left without another word. Elena went inside, set the key on her kitchen counter, and stared at it while she made dinner she didn't eat. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange, suspended reality. Elena continued working at the boutique, though she'd given her notice. She met with Catherine twice more to finalize details. She endured a dress fitting for a wedding gown she hadn't chosen, though the designer had at least asked her preferences before proceeding. She didn't hear from Victor, didn't see him. Just occasional evidence that he was coordinating everything behind the scenes. A car service appearing when she needed transportation. A security detail that remained invisible but present. An email from a wedding planner confirming details Elena hadn't known needed confirming. Aunt Diane took her to lunch in the 3rd week. "You're quieter than usual," Diane observed over salads neither of them was really eating. "Having second thoughts?" "5th or 6th thoughts, maybe. I lost count." Elena pushed lettuce around her plate. "Did you know he gave me my own wing of the house?" "Victor?" "No, but that doesn't surprise me." "Why not?" "Because he understands that you need space to survive this. He's not stupid, Elena. Trapped people are unpredictable. He's giving you room to breathe so you don't bolt." Diane paused. "Or maybe he's just being kind. It's hard to tell with him sometimes." "Have you known him long?" "I've known of him since his father was alive. Salvatore Romano used it to terrify everyone at charity events. He had this way of making even small talk feel threatening. When he died and Victor took over, people expected worse, were surprised when it wasn't." Elena set down her fork. "What's he like?" "Really?" "Controlled, strategic. Absolutely ruthless when necessary, but not cruel for cruelty's sake. Diane met Elena's eyes. Your mother asked me once what I'd do if I could go back and change one decision in my life. I told her I'd marry for security instead of love. That's bleak. That's practical. Love fades. Security allows you to build something that lasts. Diane reached across the table and squeezed Elena's hand. You're getting security, Elena. What you do with it, whether you build something or just survive until you can leave, that's up to you. And if I want both, security and love, then you'd better be patient and strategic. Victor Romano isn't a man who falls easily, if he falls at all, but he respects strength and intelligence. Show him both, consistently, and you might surprise yourself with what becomes possible. The night before the wedding, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in her apartment, her last night in this space that had been hers, and tried to imagine what came next. Tomorrow she'd become Elena Romano, wife to a man she barely knew, partner in an arrangement that felt like fiction. Her phone buzzed at midnight, a text from an unknown number. If you want to run, now would be the time. I'll understand. V. Elena stared at the message. Victor was giving her an out. Even now, even after all the contracts and preparations and money spent, he was offering her escape. She could run, could disappear, start over somewhere far away. He'd probably even help her do it, given how he'd structured everything else. But what would she be running toward? Another retail job in another city? More student loans? The same modest life she'd been living? And she'd be running away from resources, from the means to finally finish her education, from the chance to become someone who could help others the way she'd wanted to help people ever since her mother died. Elena typed back, I don't run. See you tomorrow. The response came immediately. Brave or stubborn, both. You'll figure out which one matters more. I already have. Sleep well, Elena. She didn't sleep well, but when morning came and the car arrived to take her to Victor's estate, Elena was ready. The wedding would be small, private, more like a contract signing than a celebration, but it would also be the beginning of something new. Elena Vale had spent 20 years being ordinary, being overlooked, being the girl who played by rules she never questioned. Elena Romano would be different. She didn't know exactly who that woman would become, but sitting in the back of the luxury car as it drove through Westchester's winding roads toward a future she'd never chosen, Elena made herself a promise. She would survive this. And maybe if she was smart enough and strong enough and lucky enough, she'd do more than survive. She'd thrive. The Romano estate appeared through morning mist like something from another century. Stone walls rose from manicured grounds, ivy climbing toward windows that caught early sunlight and threw it back in golden flashes. The driveway curved through gardens still waiting for spring's full arrival, past fountains and sculptures that spoke of old money and older power. Elena pressed her hand against the car window, watching the mansion grow larger as they approached. This would be home now. The word felt foreign in her mouth. The car stopped at the front entrance where stone steps led up to massive oak doors. Chen emerged from somewhere unseen and opened Elena's door before the driver could move. Miss Vale, he offered his hand to help her out. Welcome. Thank you. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. She wore a simple dress, cream-colored, elegant, without being bridal. The wedding gown waited inside somewhere, another costume for another performance. Boss is in his study. Asked me to bring you to the East Wing first, let you settle in before the ceremony. Chen gestured toward the entrance. This way. Inside, the house was exactly what Elena expected, and nothing like it simultaneously. Yes, there was wealth, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums, floors so polished she could see her reflection. But there was also warmth she hadn't anticipated. Fresh flowers in every room, windows open to let in spring air, photographs on side tables showing people laughing, living, being human. Chen led her through corridors that felt less like a mansion and more like a very large, very beautiful home. They passed a formal dining room, a library that made Elena's heart ache with want, and finally reached a door that stood slightly ajar. The East Wing, Chen said. He handed her the brass key she'd received weeks ago. It's yours. Only you and housekeeping staff you approve have access. Boss meant what he said. He won't enter without permission. Elena pushed the door open and stepped into what was apparently her sanctuary. Sunlight flooded through tall windows, illuminating hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves that stretched toward vaulted ceilings. The furniture was elegant but comfortable. Oversized chairs perfect for curling up with a book, A desk positioned to catch morning light, side tables holding lamps with soft glow bulbs. Someone had filled vases with white roses, their scent subtle and clean. Boss had the designer work from your Pinterest, Chen said from the doorway. Figured you'd want some say in how it looked. Elena turned sharply. My Pinterest? Yeah, you saved a lot of interior design posts. Designer used those as inspiration. He shrugged like this was completely normal. Bathrooms through there, bedrooms beyond that, gardens accessible through the French doors. Kitchen staff can bring meals here if you want privacy, or you can eat in the main dining room. Your call. He looked at my Pinterest. Boss is thorough, wouldn't be alive otherwise. Chen checked his watch. Ceremonies in 2 hours, hair and makeup teams waiting in your bedroom whenever you're ready. Need anything else? Elena shook her head, still processing the idea that Victor had researched her aesthetic preferences like he was preparing for a business negotiation. Then I'll leave you to it. Press 0 on any house phone if you need something. Chen paused at the door. For what it's worth, Miss Vale, I've worked for Victor Romano for 8 years. He's a hard man, sometimes a scary one, but he's fair. Treats people with respect if they earn it. You'll be all right here. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in rooms that were supposed to be hers. She explored slowly, running her hands over furniture that felt both foreign and familiar. The bedroom was massive, dominated by a 4-poster bed with gauzy curtains and a view of the garden. The bathroom had a tub large enough to swim in and a shower with 6 different heads. The closet was half filled with clothes in her size, designer labels she recognized from the boutique where she'd worked. Someone had thought of everything. The French doors opened onto a terrace overlooking the walled garden. Stone pathways wound between raised beds waiting for planting, and a fountain burbled in the center where a stone bench offered a place to sit and think. Elena stepped outside, breathing in air that smelled like earth and possibility. So this is where I'll live, she said to no one. The words felt like testing a new language, seeing how it fit in her mouth. A knock at the bedroom door pulled her back inside. 3 women entered carrying cases of equipment, the hair and makeup team presumably. Miss Vale. The oldest of the 3, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, smiled warmly. I'm Patricia. We're here to help you get ready. Unless you'd prefer to do it yourself. No, Elena gestured helplessly. I don't even know what I'm supposed to look like. Like yourself, only more so. Patricia set down her case and pulled out a chair. Come sit. We'll make you beautiful without making you someone else. They worked efficiently but gently, transforming Elena's face with products that felt like silk against her skin. Patricia explained each step, asked permission before applying anything, treated Elena like a person instead of a project. The other 2, younger women named Sarah and Michelle, handled hair with the same careful attention. An hour later, Elena stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Her hair fell in loose waves over bare shoulders, held back from her face with delicate pins that caught the light. Her makeup was subtle but transformative, eyes that looked larger and darker, lips that seemed fuller, skin that glowed like she'd been lit from within. She looked older than 20. She looked like someone who belonged in a mansion, marrying a man like Victor Romano. The dress is ready when you are, Patricia said softly. Would you like help? The wedding gown hung in the closet, wrapped in protective cloth. Sarah and Michelle lifted it carefully, and Elena's breath caught. It wasn't what she expected. No massive skirt or train that would require 3 people to manage. Instead, the dress was elegant simplicity, silk that draped and flowed, a neckline that showed her collarbones without being revealing, sleeves that ended at her elbows in delicate lace. It looked like something a woman would choose for herself, not something forced onto a bride who hadn't wanted to be one. It's beautiful, Elena whispered. Mr. Romano selected it personally, Patricia said as she helped Elena step into the dress. Brought photos of you to the designer, described your personality, asked for something that would make you feel powerful instead of displayed. Of course he did. Because Victor Romano researched everything, including how to dress the wife he'd purchased. The dress fit perfectly. Patricia fastened the back while Sarah adjusted the skirt, and Michelle made final touches to Elena's hair. When they stepped back, all 3 women looked pleased. You're ready, Patricia said. I don't feel ready. Nobody does. But you look like you could conquer the world, and sometimes that's enough. Patricia squeezed Elena's shoulder. We'll be downstairs if you need anything. They left Elena alone with her reflection. She looked like a bride, like someone getting married because she wanted to, Because she'd found love and partnership and chosen it freely. The image was so convincing that Elena almost believed it herself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Elena called, expecting Chen or maybe one of the staff. Victor Romano opened the door. He stopped just inside, his dark eyes moving over Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. He wore a charcoal suit that made his shoulders look even broader, a white shirt open at the collar, no tie. Formal enough for a wedding, casual enough to suggest this wasn't about spectacle. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony," Elena said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "I don't put much stock in superstition." Victor closed the door behind him but stayed near it, maintaining distance. "You look extraordinary." "Your designer has good taste." "I have good taste. The designer just executed my vision." He moved slightly closer, still careful not to invade her space. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified, angry, resigned. Take your pick." All reasonable responses. Victor's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "I came to offer you one final opportunity to change your mind." Elena's heart stuttered. "What?" "If you want to leave, you can. Right now, before the ceremony, with no consequences. I'll have Chen drive you anywhere you want to go. Your father's debt will still be cleared, you'll still receive $1 million as a settlement, and I'll ensure no one bothers you about this again." "Why would you do that?" "Because I want a willing partner, not a prisoner." Victor's gaze held hers. "I've structured this arrangement to be as fair as possible, but fair doesn't mean easy. If you genuinely can't live with this, I'd rather know now than watch you slowly break over the next 3 years." Elena studied him. This man who'd bought her like property and then spent weeks ensuring she had every protection, every escape route, every tool she might need to survive him. "You researched my Pinterest," she said. Victor blinked at the apparent non sequitur. "Yes. And you chose this dress because you thought it would make me feel powerful." "Yes. And you gave me an entire wing of your house and promised not to enter without permission." "Yes." Victor's expression remained neutral. "What's your point?" "My point is that you're the strangest kidnapper I've ever heard of." Elena walked toward him, her dress whispering against the floor. "Most men who force women into marriage don't spend this much energy making sure their victims are comfortable. I'm not most men." "Clearly." Elena stopped a few feet away from him. "Are you always this contradictory, or is this special treatment because I'm a purchased bride?" "I don't purchase people. I negotiate arrangements." Victor's voice was calm but firm. "There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm standing, my father sold me to you for $8 million. That sounds like a purchase." "Your father created a debt he couldn't pay. I offered a solution that benefited all parties involved. You get security and resources. I get legitimacy and partnership. Your father gets to keep breathing. Everyone wins." "Except I didn't get to choose." "You had limited options. That's not the same as having no choice." Victor moved closer, and Elena realized he was taller than she'd remembered, probably 6'3" to her 5'6" even in heels. "You could have run weeks ago, could have disappeared the moment you had access to your bank account. You didn't. You're here, in a wedding dress, having this conversation. That's choice. It's not real choice if all the alternatives are worse. Welcome to the world, Elena. Most people are choosing between bad options every day. The difference is whether you choose with agency or let circumstances choose for you." Victor's dark eyes softened slightly. "I'm offering you agency, as much as I can give while still getting what I need from this arrangement. The question is whether that's enough for you." Elena thought about her small apartment, her retail job, her student loans, thought about the dream she'd had of helping people, of making a difference, of becoming someone who mattered. Then she thought about $2 million in her bank account, about finishing her education debt-free, about resources to build something meaningful instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. "It's not enough," she said quietly, "but it's more than I had before." Victor nodded slowly. "Then shall we proceed?" "I have one question first." "Ask." Elena met his gaze directly. "Do you actually want to marry me, or am I just a convenient solution to your legitimacy problem?" For the first time since she'd met him, Victor looked surprised. His expression flickered, something almost like uncertainty crossing his features before control reasserted itself. "I want a partner who's intelligent, capable, and strong enough to stand beside me in public and push back in private. I want someone who won't crumble under pressure and won't bore me at dinner. He paused. Whether I want you specifically or just someone who fits those criteria is a question I can't fully answer yet. But I chose you. That has to count for something. Because my father offered me. Because when I researched you after your father's offer, I found someone worth choosing. Victor's voice was matter of fact. You graduated summa cum laude despite working full-time to support yourself. You volunteer at a crisis hotline every week. You've been supporting your father financially since your mother died, even though he clearly doesn't deserve it. You're loyal, intelligent, and stronger than you realize. Those are qualities I value. Elena's throat felt tight. You investigated me. Thoroughly. I don't make $8 million decisions without complete information. Victor's gaze never wavered. I know you take your coffee black, that you're afraid of heights, that you ugly cry at movies with dog deaths. I know you wanted to be a child psychologist until your mother got sick and you changed focus to grief counseling. I know you're terrified of becoming your father, weak and desperate and willing to sacrifice anything to avoid consequences. Stop. Elena's hands were shaking. Just stop. Victor stopped. You can't just... Elena struggled for words. You can't know all of that about me when I know almost nothing about you. It's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. Victor pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and handed it to Elena. This is a file containing everything I think you should know about me. Financial records, business dealings, family history, personal information. Read it or don't. But you have access to the same information I have about you. Elena took the phone, staring at the folder labeled Victor Romano, Complete Profile. Hundreds of documents and files organized and ready. Why? She asked. Because partnership requires transparency. I can't demand honesty from you while keeping secrets myself. Victor gestured to the phone. You don't have to read it now, but it's there when you want it. Elena handed back the phone. I'll read it after the ceremony. After? Because if I read it now and find something that makes me want to run, I'll have to make another choice, and I'm tired of choosing between bad options. Elena smoothed her dress. Let's just get this over with. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he offered his arm. Shall we? Elena took it. They walked through the mansion together, their footsteps echoing in corridors that would soon be familiar. Staff members smiled as they passed. Genuine warmth, not the forced politeness of employees who feared their employer. Whatever else Victor Romano was, his people seemed to respect rather than despise him. The ceremony would take place in the garden, Chen had told her. Small, private, just the officiant and a handful of witnesses. But when Elena stepped through the French doors into sunlight, she stopped breathing. The garden had been transformed. White roses climbed trellises and wound through the trees. Candles in glass holders lined stone pathways despite the daylight. A simple arch stood at the garden's center, woven with flowers and greenery. And standing near the arch were exactly 4 people. Aunt Diane in elegant lavender, Marcus looking smaller and older than Elena remembered, Chen in a dark suit, and a woman in judicial robes who must be the officiant. You said immediate family only, Victor said quietly. I interpreted that literally. Elena's eyes burned. She'd expected something cold, transactional. A quick signing in someone's office, maybe. Not this, not beauty and care and genuine effort to make the moment feel like it mattered. Thank you, she whispered. Diane approached as they descended the terrace steps. You look absolutely stunning, sweetheart. She kissed Elena's cheek. Your mother would be so proud of how strong you are. Marcus stayed back, his eyes red-rimmed and guilty. Elena met his gaze briefly and saw everything he couldn't say. Apology, shame, desperate hope for forgiveness. She looked away. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She smiled at Elena with warmth that seemed genuine. Miss Vale, I'm Judge Margaret Chen, Marcus's aunt. She gestured to Chen, who nodded acknowledgement. I've known Victor since he was a boy. If you have any concerns about proceeding, tell me now. Elena glanced at Victor. He stood calm and still, giving her space to speak if she needed to. No concerns, Elena said. Let's do this. Judge Chen opened her book. Then let's begin. We're gathered here today to witness the marriage of Victor Romano and Elena Vale. This ceremony is simple by design. These two have chosen to speak their own vows and enter this union with clear eyes and honest intentions. Elena almost laughed. Honest intentions. Sure. Victor, you may speak first, Judge Chen said. Victor turned to face Elena fully, taking both her hands in his. His grip was warm, steady. Elena, I'm not going to pretend this marriage began the way it should have. You were forced into this arrangement because your father made mistakes, and I saw an opportunity. That's the truth. And we both know it. His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. But I promise you this, I will never lie to you. I will protect you with everything I have. I will respect your intelligence, your strength, and your autonomy. I will give you space when you need it and support when you ask for it. And I will never, ever take you for granted. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. I can't promise you love. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of vulnerability, but I can promise you partnership, respect, and loyalty. If you choose to stay with me beyond the minimum 3 years, it will be because I've earned that choice every single day. This is my vow to you. Elena's heart was pounding. She'd expected platitudes maybe, or legal language dressed up as romance. Not this raw honesty that felt more intimate than any pretty lie could have been. Judge Chen nodded to Elena. Your turn, dear. Elena took a breath. She hadn't prepared anything, hadn't thought through what she might say. But standing here with Victor's hands holding hers and sunlight warming her shoulders, words came. I didn't choose this marriage, but I'm choosing how I show up to it. I choose to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. I choose to demand respect and give it when it's earned. I choose to build a life within the constraints I've been given instead of just surviving them. She squeezed Victor's hands. I can't promise to love you. I don't know you well enough for that yet. But I can promise to be a real partner, not a decoration, not a convenient fiction, but someone who stands with you and challenges you and refuses to disappear just because this started wrong. Victor's expression shifted, something like respect flickering across his features. And, Elena continued, surprising herself, I promise to try, to give this arrangement a genuine chance instead of just counting days until I can leave. Because you're right, I could have run. I didn't. That means something. It does, Victor said softly. Judge Chen smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I pronounce you husband and wife. Victor, you may kiss your bride. Victor leaned down slowly, giving Elena time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His lips brushed against hers, gentle, brief, a promise rather than a claim. When he pulled back, his eyes searched her face. All right? He asked, too quietly for anyone else to hear. All right, Elena confirmed. Diane was crying happy tears. Marcus looked like he might cry from guilt. Chen was smiling, which made his severe face look almost friendly. Congratulations, Judge Chen said warmly. May you find more happiness together than you expect. Thank you, Aunt Margaret, Victor said, and Elena realized this woman was family to him, probably one of the few people he actually trusted. There was no reception, no throwing of bouquets or cutting of cake, just champagne poured in the garden, quiet conversation, and the strange sense that something significant had just shifted. Diane pulled Elena aside after the second glass of champagne. How are you really? She asked. I don't know. Ask me in a year. Elena watched Victor speak with the judge, his posture relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before. He's not what I expected. Few people are, when you actually pay attention. Diane followed Elena's gaze. Your mother told me once that the worst mistake a woman can make is underestimating herself. Don't do that, Elena. You're stronger than this situation, and smarter than you give yourself credit for. Did Mom also have advice for being sold into marriage? Your mother would have burned this entire estate down before letting it happen. Diane's voice was fierce, but since she's not here and you are, she'd tell you to play the hand you've been dealt like a queen instead of a victim. Elena thought about that as she watched Victor laugh at something Judge Chen said, a real laugh that transformed his face, made him look younger and less dangerous. I'll try, Elena said. The guests departed as the sun lowered toward the horizon. Marcus tried to approach Elena before leaving, but she turned away. She wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Maybe she never would be. Finally, it was just Elena and Victor standing in the garden as staff quietly removed chairs and decorations. So, Victor said, we're married. Legally speaking. Is there another way to be married? Emotionally, spiritually, take your pick. Elena turned to face him. What happens now? Now you decide where you want to sleep tonight. Your wing, my room, or somewhere else entirely. Victor's expression was neutral. I won't assume anything, Elena. This marriage has requirements for public appearances, but what happens in private is negotiable. You're saying you won't expect sex? No, not unless you want it, and I sincerely doubt you want it tonight. Victor gestured toward the house. I have a guest room prepared if you want neutral territory, or you're welcome in the East Wing. I'll be in the West Wing either way. Elena should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt oddly disappointed, which made no sense at all. I'll stay in the East Wing, she said. Good. Chen will make sure you have everything you need. Victor started toward the house, then paused. Elena? Yes? Thank you for giving this a real chance. I know it's not easy. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in a garden that smelled like roses and new beginnings she hadn't asked for, but was apparently living anyway. She returned to the East Wing as evening settled over the estate. Someone had left dinner on a tray in her sitting room, elegant comfort food that suggested the kitchen staff understood she might need familiar things tonight. Elena ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Her phone showed messages from friends asking how she was, if the wedding was beautiful, if she was happy. Elena turned it off without responding. What could she say? That she'd married a criminal for money? That the ceremony was lovely and deeply wrong? That she had no idea if she was happy or horrified or both? Around 9, someone knocked softly on her door. Chen stood in the hallway holding a package. From the boss. Said you'd know what it was. Elena took it, heavy, about the size of a large book. Thank you. Need anything else tonight? No, I'm fine. Okay. Sleep well, Mrs. Romano. The name hit her like a slap. Mrs. Romano. That was who she was now. Elena closed the door and opened the package. Inside was a tablet loaded with the same file Victor had shown her earlier, his complete information, ready for her review. She curled up in the oversized chair by the window and started reading. 3 hours later, Elena understood Victor Romano in ways that made her marriage to him both more and less terrifying than before. The files painted a portrait of a man forged in violence and determined to transcend it. Victor's father, Salvatore Romano, had built an empire on brutality. Loan sharking, extortion, waste management contracts awarded through intimidation. The documents included court transcripts, witness testimonies that mysteriously disappeared, and photographs of Salvatore that made Elena's skin crawl. He'd had the eyes of a man who enjoyed hurting people. Victor had grown up watching that, learning from it. And then, when Salvatore died of a heart attack 5 years ago, systematically dismantling it. Elena read through business acquisitions that transformed criminal enterprises into legitimate operations. A waste management company cleaned up and sold to a national corporation. Loan sharking operations shut down. The debtors' accounts quietly forgiven. Protection rackets dissolved, replaced by actual security consulting firms that operated within legal boundaries. It wasn't altruism. The documents made that clear. Victor had recognized that his father's methods attracted too much law enforcement attention, created too many enemies, left too much vulnerability. So he'd transformed the Romano Empire into something that operated in gray spaces, not quite legal, not quite criminal, impossible to prosecute. But there were lines he wouldn't cross. The files included internal memos, communications between Victor and his key people. No drugs, no human trafficking, no targeting civilians who weren't actively interfering with business operations, and absolutely no tolerance for anyone who harmed women or children. 3 men had been killed on Victor's orders in the past 5 years, according to encrypted communications that someone, probably Victor himself, had decrypted for this file. Elena read the details with a sick feeling in her stomach. The first had been running a prostitution ring that included underage girls. Victor had him killed and personally ensured every girl got medical care, counseling, and enough money to start over. The second had beaten his girlfriend into a coma. Victor had him killed and paid for the woman's medical bills, then set her up with a new identity in a different state. The third had been stealing from the organization and planning to frame a lower-level employee who had a family to support. Victor had him killed and promoted the employee he'd tried to destroy. Brutal. Strategic. Operating by a moral code that made sense only in a world where violence was currency and mercy was calculated. Elena set down the tablet and stared out at the dark garden. This was the man she'd married. Someone who would kill without hesitation, but only for specific reasons. Someone who'd spent 5 years transforming a criminal empire into something almost respectable, while maintaining enough power that no one dared challenge him. Someone who'd researched her Pinterest and given her a library because he understood she needed beauty and autonomy to survive this arrangement. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victor, even though it was nearly midnight. Still reading, or did the files put you to sleep? Elena typed back, still reading, you killed 3 people. Yes. That's all you have to say? Yes? Would you prefer I apologize for removing people who hurt the vulnerable? I'm not sorry, I'd do it again. Elena stared at the message. She should be horrified. Should be calling the police or a lawyer or someone who could get her away from a man who casually admitted to murder. Instead, she typed, the girl from the prostitution ring. Did she really get counseling? She's in college now, pre-med, sends me a card every Christmas. And the woman whose boyfriend you killed? Married with 2 kids? Owns a bakery in Oregon? Happy, last I checked. Elena's hands were shaking. You keep tabs on them? I make sure my decisions have the outcomes I intended. That requires follow-up. She didn't know what to say to that. Victor Romano, crime lord and unlikely benefactor, checking in on the people he'd saved by killing their abusers. Are you all right? Victor's next message came through. I know this is a lot of information to process. I don't know what I am, Elena admitted. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A monster. Someone who'd hurt me or use me and discard me when I stopped being useful. I understand why you'd think that, but I told you I don't lie, Elena. I meant it when I said I'd protect you, even from yourself. The response took longer this time, especially from myself. If I ever become the kind of man you need protection from, I hope you'll be strong enough to leave. Elena set down her phone and pressed her palms against her eyes. She'd married a killer who wanted her to be strong enough to escape him if necessary. A man who'd murdered people for hurting the vulnerable while simultaneously running criminal operations. Someone who defied every category she tried to put him in. She fell asleep in the chair, still wearing her wedding dress, dreaming of roses and violence and hands that could destroy or protect, depending on the day. Morning came with sunshine and a soft knock on her door. Elena woke disoriented, her neck aching from the awkward position. She stumbled to the door and found a young woman holding a breakfast tray. Good morning, Mrs. Romano. I'm Maria, one of the house staff. Mr. Romano asked me to bring you breakfast and let you know he's left for a business meeting. He'll be back this evening. Elena took the tray automatically. Thank you. Also, there's a package in your sitting room, arrived early this morning. Maria smiled warmly. Let me know if you need anything else. The package was large, wrapped in brown paper with Elena's name written on top in that same elegant script. She set down her breakfast and opened it carefully. Inside were books, dozens of them. Textbooks on grief counseling, trauma therapy, child psychology. Reference materials Elena had added to wish lists months ago but couldn't afford. And on top, a handwritten note. Elena, you mentioned wanting to finish your degree. These might help. The enrollment paperwork for the graduate program at Columbia is in the envelope. I took the liberty of submitting your application and writing a recommendation. You've been accepted, pending your decision to attend. Classes start in 3 weeks if you're interested. V. Elena sank onto the couch, staring at the books. He'd gotten her into Columbia, just like that. Because she'd mentioned wanting to continue her education. The cynical part of her whispered that this was manipulation, a way to make her grateful and compliant. But the rest of her recognized something else. Someone paying attention, making her goals possible instead of just offering empty support. She spent the morning exploring the books, reading the acceptance letter from Columbia, trying to imagine herself as a graduate student while living in a mansion as a crime lord's wife. The cognitive dissonance made her head hurt. Around noon, Chen appeared at her door. Mrs. Romano, you have a visitor. Your Aunt Diane is asking to see you. Elena had changed out of her wedding dress, finally, now wearing jeans and a sweater from the mysteriously stocked closet. Send her up, please. Diane arrived carrying shopping bags and wearing an expression that suggested she was on a mission. Before you say anything, Diane started, I know you probably want to be alone. But I also know that being alone the day after your wedding in a strange house with a husband you barely know is probably making you crazy. So I brought supplies. She set down the bags and started pulling out items. Chocolate, wine, magazines, a heating pad, face masks. I don't know if you need comfort or distraction or both, Diane continued. But I figured we'd figure it out together. Elena felt her eyes burn. Thank you. Oh, sweetheart. Diane pulled her into a hug. You don't have to be strong every second. It's okay to fall apart a little. So Elena did. She cried into her aunt's shoulder while Diane held her and murmured reassurances. And when she was done crying, they opened the wine, even though it was barely noon, and ate chocolate and talked about everything except the wedding. He got me into Colombia, Elena said eventually, curled up on the couch, with her third glass of wine warming her blood. Victor did? For graduate school? Applied on my behalf. Wrote a recommendation? Got me accepted. Elena gestured at the books scattered around the room. Bought me every textbook I might need. Diane studied her niece carefully. And how do you feel about that? Confused, grateful, angry that I'm grateful. Elena took another sip of wine. I should hate him. He bought me like property, but he keeps doing things that make it hard to hate him. Maybe that's the point. Maybe he's smart enough to know that you'll be a better partner if he treats you like a person instead of a possession. Diane paused. Or maybe he's actually trying to make this bearable for you. People can be complicated, Elena, even criminals. You sound like you approve of him. I sound like someone who's watched powerful men operate for 40 years and recognizes the difference between cruelty and pragmatism. Diane set down her wine glass. Victor Romano is dangerous. Don't ever forget that. But he's not cruel, and that matters more than you might think. They spent the afternoon together, and by the time Diane left, Elena felt steadier. Still confused, still angry at the circumstances, but less alone in navigating them. Evening arrived with the sound of a car in the driveway. Elena watched from her window as Victor emerged, speaking on his phone with the intense focus she was starting to recognize as his default state. Chen flanked him, and two other men Elena didn't recognize followed at a discreet distance. Her husband. Strange how the word was starting to feel less foreign. A soft knock at her door. Elena opened it to find Victor standing in the hallway, still in his business suit, looking tired around the eyes. May I come in? He asked. Elena stepped back, letting him enter her sanctuary. He looked around at the books scattered everywhere, the wine glasses, the evidence of Diane's visit. Good day? He asked. Confusing day. Diane visited. I know, Chen told me. Victor moved to the window, looking out at the garden. I'm glad you had company. First days in new places can be difficult. You got me into Colombia. Yes. Without asking me first. I couldn't ask without knowing if it was possible, and I couldn't know if it was possible without applying. Victor turned to face her. Are you angry? Elena considered. I don't know. Part of me is furious that you made decisions about my life without consulting me. Part of me is grateful because you made something possible that I'd thought was years away. She crossed her arms. You're very good at making me feel contradictory things. It's not intentional. I'm simply trying to give you what you said you wanted. Victor's expression was difficult to read. You mentioned wanting to finish your education. I made that possible. Would you prefer I hadn't? I'd prefer you'd asked me first if I wanted you to intervene. Fair enough. I'll remember that. Victor moved toward the door, apparently preparing to leave. I came to ask if you'd like to have dinner with me. In the main dining room, not here. But if you'd rather eat alone, I understand. Elena thought about spending another evening by herself, processing everything in circles that led nowhere. Dinner sounds fine, she said. Give me 20 minutes to change. You look fine as you are. I'm wearing jeans and a sweater that has chocolate on it. I'll change. Victor's mouth twitched. 20 minutes. I'll meet you downstairs. Elena chose her outfit carefully. A simple dress that hit just above her knees, elegant without trying too hard. She fixed her hair and applied minimal makeup, studying herself in the mirror and wondering what Victor saw when he looked at her. A convenient solution to a problem? An interesting acquisition? Something more? The dining room was smaller than she expected, intimate rather than formal. A table set for two, candles already lit, wine breathing in a crystal decanter. Victor stood when she entered, pulling out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy that seemed genuine rather than performative. Thank you, Elena said as she sat. Of course. Victor took his own seat across from her. I asked the chef to prepare several options since I don't know your preferences yet. If nothing appeals, he can make something else. The food was extraordinary, multiple courses, each one perfectly prepared and presented. Elena ate slowly, savoring flavors that made her retail salary budget meals seem like cardboard in comparison. They talked carefully at first, dancing around topics that felt too heavy for a first real conversation. Victor asked about her morning, her reaction to the books, whether the East Wing had everything she needed. Elena asked about his business meeting, how he spent his days, what his normal routine looked like. Mostly I'm in the city, Victor said over the main course. Meetings, negotiations, putting out fires. I try to be home by 7 most evenings, but some days run longer. You're welcome to come with me if you're interested in seeing how the operations work, or you can stay here and do your own thing. Your choice. You'd let me see your business operations. Some of them. The legitimate ones, certainly. You're my wife now, Elena. People will expect you to understand at least the basics of what I do. Victor paused. And I'd rather you see the reality than imagine something worse. Is the reality better or worse than what I'd imagine? Probably both, depending on the day. Victor's honesty was becoming almost refreshing. I run multiple businesses, most of which are completely legal. Construction, real estate development, security consulting. Some operations exist in gray areas, technically legal but ethically questionable. And yes, some things cross lines that would make prosecutors very happy if they could prove anything. Which they can't, Victor confirmed. I'm very good at insulation, compartmentalization, and ensuring nothing leads back to me directly. Elena took a sip of wine. You're telling me this very calmly. Would you prefer I be dramatic about it? I told you I wouldn't lie to you. This is the truth of who I am and what I do. You can choose how to respond to that information. And if my response is to go to the police? Then you'd find that several key officers are on my payroll, and any investigation would stall before it started. Victor's tone remained conversational. Not because I'm proud of corruption, but because that's the reality of operating in this world. I didn't create the system, Elena. I just learned to work within it more effectively than most. That's a very convenient rationalization. Perhaps, but it's also accurate. Victor leaned back in his chair. I could pretend to be something I'm not, could hide the uglier aspects of my life and let you discover them gradually, over months or years. Would you prefer that? Elena thought about it. No. I'd rather know what I'm dealing with. Then I'll continue being honest, and you can continue deciding what you think of me based on facts rather than fiction. Dessert arrived, something chocolate and decadent that made Elena close her eyes in appreciation. When she opened them, Victor was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. What? She asked. Nothing. You just look genuinely happy for a moment. It's a good look on you. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Don't do that. Do what? Say things that sound like compliments but feel like strategies. Victor set down his fork. That wasn't strategy. That was observation. You have a beautiful smile, and I'm pleased I got to see it. He paused. Though I understand why you'd be suspicious of anything I say right now, trust is earned, not purchased. I'm aware I have a long way to go. They finished dessert in comfortable silence. When staff came to clear the plates, Victor dismissed them and poured more wine for both of them. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Anything. Why did you really agree to the mutual fidelity clause? You could have demanded loyalty from me without offering it yourself. Victor swirled wine in his glass, considering his answer. Because I don't want to be my father. Salvatore had mistresses, treated my mother like furniture, and wondered why she drank herself to death before 40. I watched that growing up and decided I'd rather be alone than replicate it. So this is about your mother? Partially. It's also about respect. If I'm asking you to be faithful, the least I can do is offer the same. Anything else would be hypocritical. Victor met her eyes. And frankly, I'm not interested in other women. I have enough complications in my life without adding infidelity to the list. Not interested in other women or not interested in anyone? An excellent question that I can't fully answer yet. Victor's smile was slight but genuine. I've never been good at relationships. Never saw the point when my focus needed to be on business, on survival, on building something that would outlast my father's legacy. Romance seemed like a distraction I couldn't afford. And now? Now I have a wife who's intelligent enough to challenge me and strong enough to potentially become an actual partner instead of just an ornament. Victor's gaze was steady. I don't know what that becomes, Elena, but I'm curious to find out. Elena's heart was beating faster. You realize how insane this is, right? We're married strangers having wine and talking about fidelity, like we're on a normal date instead of trapped in an arrangement neither of us would have chosen. I'm aware. Does that make the conversation less valuable? I don't know. Maybe it makes it more valuable because we're being honest about the insanity. Victor laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face the way it had at the wedding. You're going to keep me on my toes, aren't you? That's the plan. Someone needs to remind you that you're not always right. I look forward to it. They talked until midnight, the conversation ranging from serious to absurd. Victor told her about growing up in his father's shadow, watching violence become normalized, having to choose between becoming a monster or finding a different path. Elena told him about her mother's death, her father's slow dissolution, her desperate need to help people process grief because she'd never properly processed her own. "That's why you want to be a therapist," Victor said. It wasn't a question. "Partially, I want to help kids who've lost parents, give them tools I never had, help them not turn into—" Elena stopped. "Into your father?" Victor finished gently. "That's a worthy goal. You don't think it's naive?" "I think it's optimistic, which is different from naive. Naive would be thinking you can save everyone. Optimistic is recognizing you can help some people and choosing to try anyway." Victor refilled her wine glass. "Columbia's program is excellent. You'll do well there." "You sound very certain." "I am. You're capable of far more than you give yourself credit for." Victor's expression grew serious. "That's something we'll need to work on. You recognizing your own strength instead of constantly doubting it. And you're going to teach me that? I'm going to create circumstances where you discover it yourself. There's a difference." Elena studied him across the table. This complicated, dangerous, surprisingly thoughtful man who'd bought her and then immediately started investing in her independence. "What happens next?" she asked quietly. "With us, I mean. Do we just keep having dinners and conversations until 3 years pass and I leave? That's one option, or we could build something more substantial than a transaction with an expiration date." Victor's dark eyes held hers. "I told you I can't promise love, but I can promise partnership, respect, and the freedom to become whoever you're meant to be. If that's enough for you, we might surprise ourselves with what becomes possible. And if it's not enough, then in 3 years you'll leave with $10 million and a graduate degree and hopefully some good memories to balance the bad ones." Victor's voice was steady. "Either way, you'll be stronger than you are now. I'll make sure of that." Elena wanted to argue, to insist that she was already strong, that she didn't need him to make her anything. But part of her recognized the truth in his words. She'd been surviving for 3 years, since her mother's death, but she hadn't been thriving, hadn't been building toward anything except trying to avoid her father's mistakes. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? Okay, let's build something. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm willing to try." Elena took a breath. "On one condition." "Name it." "You have to actually let me be a partner. Not just tell me that's what you want, while actually keeping me separate from anything important. If you're serious about this, I need to be included, consulted, treated like an equal." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and extended his hand across the table. "Deal," he said. Elena took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Deal," she echoed. They stood there, hands clasped across the dinner table, and Elena felt something shift. Not love. She wasn't naive enough to call it that, but possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement could become something neither of them had anticipated. Victor released her hand. "It's late. You should get some rest." "Are you always this courteous with people you've purchased?" "Only the ones I respect." Victor's smile was slight but genuine. "Sleep well, Elena. Tomorrow, if you're interested, I'll show you the rest of the estate, including the parts most people never see. The secret crime lair. Something like that. We'll call it trust building through transparency." Elena laughed despite herself. "You're ridiculous. I'm practical. There's a difference." Victor moved toward the door, then paused. "Thank you for having dinner with me. I enjoyed it more than I expected." "Me too," Elena admitted, which is either a good sign or evidence that I'm developing Stockholm Syndrome. Let's hope it's the former. Victor's expression grew serious. "Elena, I know this situation isn't what either of us would have chosen, but I'm grateful you're giving me, a genuine chance. That means more than you might think." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in a dining room that smelled like wine and candle wax and the strange promise of something neither of them had planned for. She returned to the east wing, changed into pajamas, and lay in the massive bed staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the west wing, Victor was probably doing the same. Her husband. Her partner, maybe. Her future, whether she wanted it or not. Elena fell asleep thinking about possibilities and wondering if it was possible to choose something that had started as coercion. If agency could be reclaimed even when it had been stolen first. She didn't have answers yet. But for the first time since that terrible night at the Bancroft Hotel, Elena felt like maybe she didn't need all the answers immediately. Maybe it was enough to take it one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one choice at a time. And maybe, just maybe, Victor Romano would turn out to be someone worth choosing after all. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Elena hadn't anticipated. Mornings in the library of the East Wing, reading her graduate textbooks and preparing for Columbia. Afternoons sometimes with Victor as he showed her the legitimate operations, the construction sites where his crews worked, the real estate holdings that dotted the city, the security consulting firm that employed former military and law enforcement. He kept his promise about transparency, showed her financial records, explained the business structures, introduced her to key people who would now be part of her life, whether she wanted them or not. Chen became a constant presence, professional and surprisingly funny once Elena got past his intimidating exterior. The house staff treated her with genuine warmth, rather than the forced deference she'd expected. And every evening, she and Victor had dinner together. Sometimes they talked about business, sometimes about her upcoming classes, sometimes about nothing important at all, books they'd read, movies they'd seen, the strange experience of being married strangers learning each other like a language neither had studied before. Elena found herself looking forward to those dinners more than she wanted to admit, but there were boundaries they didn't cross. Victor never entered the East Wing without permission, never pushed for physical intimacy beyond the occasional hand on her lower back at public events, which they'd started attending. Never demanded more than she was willing to give. It should have been a relief. Instead, Elena found herself wondering what would happen if she invited him to cross those boundaries, if she wanted him to. Which was insane, she reminded herself regularly. This was a business arrangement with an expiration date, not a romance. Catching feelings would be the stupidest possible mistake. The thought was interrupted by her phone ringing. Catherine Walsh. "Good morning," Elena answered. "Is something wrong with the prenup?" "No, everything's finalized and filed. I'm calling about something else." Catherine's tone was serious. "Have you been following the news about the Kozlov organization?" "No. Should I have been?" "Probably. They're a rival operation that's been probing Victor's territory for the past month. Small things at first, testing boundaries, seeing how he'd respond. It's escalating." Catherine paused. "Victor hasn't mentioned this to you?" Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "No, he hasn't." "Then you should ask him about it, soon, because if Kozlov decides to push harder, you could become a target. You need to understand what you're walking into." After Catherine hung up, Elena sat staring at her phone. Victor had promised transparency, but apparently that didn't extend to threats against his organization. Against her, by extension. She found him in his study, Chen and 2 other men she recognized as high-level security personnel standing around his desk, looking at what appeared to be surveillance photos. "Elena." Victor looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Is everything all right?" "I need to talk to you, alone." Victor dismissed the men with a gesture. Chen gave Elena an unreadable look as he left, closing the door behind him. "What's wrong?" Victor asked. Catherine Walsh just called. She asked if I'd been following the news about the Kozlov organization. Elena crossed her arms. "Want to tell me why my lawyer knows about threats to your territory that I don't?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Catherine needs to learn discretion. Catherine is looking out for me, which is literally her job. You, on the other hand, promised transparency." Elena moved closer to his desk. "So either you lied about that, or you don't actually see me as a partner. Which is it?" "Neither. I was trying to protect you from what? Information? Reality? The actual situation I'm living in?" Elena's voice rose. "You can't tell me I'm your partner and then hide things from me because you've decided I can't handle them. That's not how partnerships work." Victor stood slowly, his expression difficult to read. "You're right. I apologize." The immediate capitulation surprised her. Elena had expected an argument, justifications, maybe some patronizing explanation about how he was just keeping her safe. "That's it? You're just going to apologize?" "What else would you like me to do?" "You're correct. I promised transparency and then failed to provide it. That was wrong." Victor gestured to the photos on his desk. "Dmitry Kozlov runs an organization similar to mine, but without the ethical constraints. Drugs, trafficking, extreme violence. He's been expanding into territories that border mine, and now he's testing whether I'll push back or let him encroach." Elena looked at the surveillance photos. They showed a man in his 50s, heavy-set, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. Other photos showed younger men, presumably Kozlov's people, at various locations around the city. "What kind of testing?" Elena asked. "Harassment of businesses under my protection. Poaching employees. small acts of vandalism and intimidation. Victor's voice was calm, but Elena could hear the steel underneath. Nothing I can't handle, but it's escalating. And you didn't tell me because? Because you've been adjusting to a new life, preparing for graduate school, and generally having enough to deal with without adding the threat of violence from a rival crime organization. Victor met her eyes. But you're right that you deserve to know. It won't happen again. Elena studied the photos more carefully. Catherine said I could become a target. It's possible, but unlikely. Kozlov is brutal, but not stupid. Going after you would guarantee a war he's not ready for. Victor paused. That said, I'm increasing your security detail. Chen will coordinate, and you'll have at least 2 people with you anytime you leave the estate. I already have security. You have 1 person who maintains distance. Now you'll have a team that stays close. But the Victor's tone left no room for argument. This is non-negotiable, Elena. If Kozlov even thinks about using you as leverage, I need to know you're protected. Elena should have been angry about the unilateral decision. Instead, she found herself oddly touched that Victor's first response to her confrontation was to ensure her safety. Okay, she said. But from now on, you tell me about threats. All of them. I can't make informed decisions if you're filtering information. Agreed. Victor moved around the desk, stopping a few feet from her. I'm still learning how to do this. Having a partner who actually needs to know things instead of just existing for appearances. I'll make mistakes, but I'll try to make fewer of them. That's all I'm asking. Elena gestured to the photos. So, what's your plan with Kozlov? Victor looked surprised again. You want strategic details? You said I'm your partner. Partners understand strategy. Elena sat down in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. So tell me, what are you going to do about this? Victor studied her for a moment, something like respect crossing his features. Then he sat down and started explaining. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Victor wouldn't respond to the small provocations, which would make Kozlov think he was weak or distracted. Let Kozlov overextend, get confident, push into territory that seemed undefended. Then, when Kozlov had committed resources and attention to the expansion, Victor would respond with overwhelming force, not violence necessarily, but economic and political pressure that would collapse Kozlov's operation from within. You're setting a trap, Elena said. I'm creating an opportunity for my opponent to defeat himself, Victor corrected. Much cleaner and less likely to result in body counts that attract federal attention. But if he doesn't fall for it, if he realizes it's a trap, then we move to contingency plans that are progressively more aggressive until one of them works. Victor's expression was calm, almost detached. I've been doing this for 5 years, Elena. Kozlov is dangerous but predictable. He'll overreach because that's what men like him always do. Elena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who bought her graduate textbooks with the strategist calmly discussing how to destroy a rival criminal organization. How do you do it? She asked quietly. Do what? Switch between the 2 versions of yourself. The man who has dinner with me and talks about books, and the man who plans to dismantle someone's entire operation without blinking. Victor was quiet for a long moment. They're not different versions. They're the same person handling different situations. I don't become someone else when I'm with you, Elena. I'm just showing you parts of myself that most people never see. Because most people can't be trusted with them. Exactly. Victor's gaze was steady. The fact that I'm showing you means something. I hope you understand that. Elena did understand, which scared her more than the Kozlov situation, because it meant Victor was trusting her, including her, treating her like she actually mattered, instead of like a convenient acquisition. And it meant she was starting to trust him back. The next week, Elena started classes at Columbia. The campus was beautiful, the professors impressive, her fellow students intimidatingly brilliant. She felt like an imposter at first, a crime lord's wife playing at being a serious graduate student. But the work was engaging enough that she forgot to feel self-conscious. Trauma theory, grief counseling techniques, child psychology. Everything she'd wanted to study, finally within reach. She threw herself into reading and assignments, spending long hours in the Columbia Library or her study at the estate. Victor seemed pleased by her dedication. He'd ask about her classes over dinner, actually listening when she explained complicated concepts, offering perspectives she hadn't considered. Sometimes he'd find her studying late at night and bring coffee, sitting quietly in her space without interrupting, just being present. It was domestic in a way Elena hadn't anticipated. Comfortable. Almost normal. if she ignored the armed security outside and the criminal empire her husband ran during business hours. 3 weeks into the semester, Elena came home to find the house in chaos. Staff members moved with urgent purpose. Security personnel spoke into radios with tense voices, and Chen met her at the door with an expression that made her stomach drop. "What happened?" Elena asked. "Kozlov made a move. Hit 3 of our businesses simultaneously. Nothing major, but coordinated enough to send a message." Chen's voice was tight. "Boss is in the city dealing with it. He asked me to keep you here and make sure you're safe." "I'm fine. What kind of move?" "Vandalism, mostly. Broken windows, spray paint, couple of small fires. No casualties, but it's bold. Broad daylight, multiple locations. He's showing he can strike whenever he wants." Elena processed this. Victor said Kozlov would overextend. Is this the overextension? Chen looked at her sharply. "Boss told you about the strategy?" "He's been keeping me informed, per my request." Elena set down her bag. "So is this what Victor wanted? Kozlov showing his hand?" "Probably, though I doubt he wanted it this public." Chen's radio crackled with an update. He listened, then looked back at Elena. "Boss is going to be late tonight, possibly very late. He wanted me to tell you not to wait up." Elena nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that settled in her chest. She'd gotten used to their dinners, to the conversations that made her forget this was supposed to be temporary. "Okay, let me know if you need anything from me. Just stay inside and stay safe. That's what he needs from you right now." Elena retreated to the east wing, but studying was impossible. She kept checking her phone, looking for updates from Victor. Nothing. Just silence that stretched into hours. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to the main library. The house was quiet, most of the staff gone for the night. She curled up in a leather chair with a book she wasn't really reading, just needing to be somewhere that felt less isolated than her rooms. She must have dozed off, because she woke to the sound of footsteps and Victor's voice speaking quietly to someone on the phone. Elena stayed still, watching through half-closed eyes as he entered the library. He looked exhausted. His suit jacket was gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. There was a cut on his cheekbone that hadn't been there this morning, and his knuckles were bruised. Victor ended his call and sank into the chair across from Elena, not noticing she was awake. He pressed his palms against his eyes, his shoulders tight with stress. "You're hurt," Elena said quietly. Victor's head snapped up. "You should be asleep." "So should you." Elena sat up properly, studying the cut on his face. "What happened?" "Kozlov's people were waiting when I went to assess the damage at one of the sites. They wanted to send a message more directly." Victor touched his cheekbone gingerly. "I sent one back." "Are they alive?" "Yes, bruised and possibly concussed, but alive. I don't kill people for making stupid mistakes. I save that for people who harm the vulnerable." Victor's smile was grim. "Though I imagine they're regretting their life choices at the moment." Elena stood and moved to his chair. "Let me see." "It's fine. Let me see, Victor." He went still as she leaned down, her fingers gentle on his jaw as she tilted his face toward the light. The cut wasn't deep, but it would leave a mark. His knuckles were worse, split skin, swelling that suggested he'd hit someone multiple times with considerable force. "You need ice for your hands," Elena said. "I need bourbon and sleep, in that order. You need ice and antiseptic, or these are going to get infected." Elena straightened. "Stay here." She found the kitchen, located the first aid supplies that Chen had shown her weeks ago, and returned with ice packs and medical supplies. Victor watched her with an unreadable expression as she knelt beside his chair. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know. Give me your hands." He extended them, and Elena began cleaning the split knuckles with careful efficiency. Victor hissed when the antiseptic hit broken skin, but he didn't pull away. "You've done this before," he observed. "My mom used to patch up my dad after his stupider decisions. I learned by watching." Elena wrapped his knuckles in gauze, though his fights were usually with furniture, not rival gangsters. Slightly different skill set required. Not that different. Stupid is stupid, regardless of context. Elena finished with his hands and moved to the cut on his face. "This needs butterfly stitches." "Just bandage it. It needs stitches, or it'll scar worse than it has to." Elena met his eyes. "Stop being difficult and let me help you." Victor held her gaze for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded. Elena worked carefully, her fingers steady as she cleaned the wound and applied the butterfly stitches with precision. Victor sat perfectly still, his breathing controlled, his dark eyes never leaving her face. There, Elena said finally, stepping back. Try not to get punched in the face for a few days while it heals. I'll do my best. Victor caught her wrist gently as she started to move away. Thank you. You're welcome. They stayed like that, his fingers warm around her wrist, her heart beating faster than the situation warranted. The library was quiet except for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, the moment stretching into something that felt significant. I was worried about you, Elena admitted quietly. Victor's grip tightened slightly. Chen told you to go to sleep. Chen doesn't get to tell me what to do. Neither do you, for the record. Elena sat down on the arm of his chair. I know you can handle yourself. I know you've been doing this for years, and you're good at it. But I still worried. I don't think anyone's worried about me in a very long time. Then they're idiots. You're not invincible, Victor. Tonight proved that. Tonight proved that Kozlov is getting desperate, which means my strategy is working. Victor released her wrist but didn't move away. But you're right that I'm not invincible. Just very, very careful. Careful people don't come home with split knuckles and facial cuts. Careful people sometimes have to respond to threats with sufficient force to discourage future attempts. Victor's voice was matter of fact. Those men needed to understand that I'm not weak just because I haven't responded to Kozlov's provocations yet. Now they do. Elena studied his face, the butterfly stitches, the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that suggested adrenaline still hadn't fully left his system. You're going to destroy him, aren't you? She said quietly. Kozlov, this isn't just about defending territory. You're going to dismantle his entire operation. Yes. No hesitation, no apology. He threatened my businesses, my people, and indirectly you. That requires a response that ensures he never makes that mistake again. When? Soon. He's almost overextended enough. Victor's gaze was steady. Does it bother you, knowing I'm planning to ruin someone? Elena considered. A month ago, the answer would have been an automatic yes. Now, after weeks of learning how this world worked, after understanding what Kozlov represented, the trafficking, the drugs, the violence without conscience, her answer was more complicated. It bothers me that it doesn't bother me as much as it should, she said finally. I should be horrified, should be calling the police or running away or something. Instead, I'm sitting here patching you up and asking about your strategy. You're adapting. That's not weakness, Elena. That's survival. Or it's me becoming someone I don't recognize. Or it's you becoming someone stronger than you were before. Victor reached up, his bandaged fingers gentle against her cheek. You're not your father. You'll never be him. Adapting to circumstances doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. Elena leaned into his touch without meaning to, the warmth of his palm against her skin making her breath catch. This was dangerous territory. She knew it, could feel the shift happening between them, the arrangement that was supposed to be temporary starting to feel like something else entirely. Victor, she whispered. I know. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. We should stop. Probably. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, taut with possibility. Both of them balanced on an edge neither had planned to approach. Elena could feel her heart pounding, could see Victor's pulse beating at his throat, could sense that if either of them moved the wrong way, something fundamental would change. Victor pulled back first. You should get some sleep, he said, his voice rough. Classes tomorrow. Elena nodded, standing on shaky legs. You should too. I will, after I finish some calls. Victor, I'm fine, Elena. I promise. He stood as well, maintaining careful distance between them. Thank you for patching me up, and for waiting up even though you didn't have to. You're welcome. Elena fled to the east wing before she could do something stupid like close the distance between them and find out what would happen if she did. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the moment in the library over and over, the way Victor had looked at her, the way his touch had made her skin warm. The terrifying realization that somewhere in the past month, her marriage of convenience had started becoming something real. Her phone buzzed, a text from Victor. Sleep well? And Elena? I was worried about you too, all day, knowing Kozlov was escalating, just so you know. Elena stared at the message, her chest tight. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, We're a pair of idiots, aren't we? Probably, but at least we're idiots together. Elena set down her phone and closed her eyes. a smile tugging at her lips despite everything. Somewhere in the West Wing, Victor was probably doing the same, and tomorrow they'd pretend nothing had shifted between them, would go back to being careful and distant and safe. But tonight, Elena let herself imagine what might happen if they stopped pretending. If they chose each other not because of contracts or circumstances, but because somehow, impossibly, this broken arrangement had started growing into something neither of them had expected, something that felt dangerously close to real. The week after their moment in the library, Elena and Victor circled each other like dancers learning complicated choreography. Polite at breakfast when their schedules aligned. Professional when discussing Kozlov's escalating provocations. Careful never to be alone in small spaces where the air felt too charged and mistakes became too easy to make. Elena threw herself into her coursework with almost manic focus. If she was busy analyzing attachment theory and trauma responses, she didn't have time to think about how Victor's hand felt against her cheek or the way her heart had stuttered when he admitted to worrying about her. But 3 days after the library incident, Chen found her in the East Wing with news that shattered her careful avoidance. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Kozlov knows about Columbia." Elena's blood went cold. "What do you mean he knows?" "One of his people was spotted on campus yesterday, watching you." Chen's expression was grim. "We pulled you out before he could get close, but it's clear Kozlov's done his research. He knows your schedule, your routine, where you're vulnerable. Victor said going after me would guarantee a war Kozlov wasn't ready for. Apparently he's decided he is ready, or desperate enough that it doesn't matter." Chen pulled up photos on his phone, surveillance images of a man in his 30s watching Elena from across the Columbia Quad. "Boss is handling it, but he wanted you to know that you're not going to campus until this is resolved. I have classes, I have assignments due, which you can do remotely for now. Your professors have been contacted, arrangements made. You're not leaving the estate until Kozlov is neutralized." Chen's tone left no room for argument. "Boss's orders." Elena wanted to fight, to insist she wouldn't be kept prisoner in her own home because some criminal had decided to use her as leverage. But the fear threading through her anger was stronger. She'd seen what men like Kozlov did to the vulnerable. She wasn't naive enough to think her graduate student status would protect her if he got his hands on her. "Where's Victor?" she asked. "In the city, meeting with people who can help accelerate our timeline." Chen hesitated. "He's moving fast, Mrs. Romano. Faster than I've seen him move on anything. Kozlov threatening you changed the equation." After Chen left, Elena paced her rooms trying to process. She should be angry that Victor was making decisions about her safety without consulting her, should resent being confined to the estate like a child who couldn't take care of herself. Instead, she was terrified. And beneath the terror, something else, warmth at the knowledge that Victor was upending his carefully calculated strategy because someone had threatened her. She was still pacing when her phone rang. "Victor." "Chen told you," he said without preamble. "Yes. He also said I'm under house arrest until you deal with Kozlov." "It's not house arrest. It's strategic protection." Victor's voice was tight, stressed in a way she'd never heard before. "Elena, I need you to understand something. If Kozlov gets his hands on you, he won't use you as leverage. He'll hurt you to hurt me, and then he'll kill you to prove a point. I can't—" He stopped. "I can't allow that to happen." Elena sank onto her couch. "What's the new plan?" "The same plan, but compressed. We're moving tonight instead of waiting for him to overextend further. It's riskier, less certain, but I'm not letting him have another week to get closer to you." "What do you need me to do?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Stay safe. That's all I need from you. Stay in the East Wing, let Chen's people protect you, and wait for me to come home." "Victor, I have to go. There's a meeting in 5 minutes and I need to be focused." He paused. "I'll see you tonight, I promise." He hung up before Elena could respond. The day crawled past. Elena tried to study, but the words blurred together meaninglessly. She tried to read for pleasure, but couldn't focus. Finally, she gave up and just sat in the library watching the gardens through the window, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Chen checked in every hour. No updates, just confirmation that everything was proceeding according to plan. Whatever that plan was. Evening came with no word from Victor. Then night. Elena picked at dinner that tasted like cardboard, her stomach too knotted to manage more than a few bites. Around 10, Chen appeared at her door with an expression that made Elena's heart stop. "What happened?" she demanded. "Nothing bad. Boss is fine. Operation is proceeding." Chen's jaw was tight. But Kozlov made one last move, hit the estate perimeter about 20 minutes ago. 3 vehicles, armed men, trying to breach the gates. Elena stood, her legs shaking. Did they get in? No, we were ready for them, turned them back, detained 2 for questioning. Chen's eyes were hard, but it confirms what we suspected. Kozlov's endgame was always you. He wants leverage, and he's willing to escalate to get it. Where's Victor now? Finishing what he started. He's taking down every piece of Kozlov's operation simultaneously. Warehouses raided, bank accounts frozen, key personnel arrested. It's not subtle, but it's effective. Chen's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at Elena. That was the boss. Says to tell you it's almost over. Kozlov's running out of options. Elena paced her sitting room, her mind racing. Somewhere in the city, Victor was systematically destroying a rival organization because that organization had threatened her. Men were probably being hurt, arrested, their lives demolished. And it was happening because Elena had become something more than just a convenient wife. She'd become someone Victor would go to war to protect. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it filled her with a certainty that had been building for weeks, ever since that first honest conversation over dinner when Victor had promised her partnership instead of pretty lies. She was in love with him. The realization hit like lightning, sudden, illuminating, impossible to ignore. Somewhere between this wedding she hadn't wanted and tonight's siege, Elena had fallen completely in love with the man who'd bought her and then spent every day since proving he saw her as infinitely more valuable than the price he'd paid. Mrs. Romano? Chen's voice pulled her back. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, just worried. Elena forced her voice steady. When will Victor be back? Couple hours, probably. These things take time to wrap up properly. But it was less than an hour when Elena heard cars in the driveway, voices in the front hall, footsteps moving through the house with urgent purpose. She opened her door to find Victor striding down the corridor, Chen and several security personnel flanking him. He stopped when he saw her. Their eyes met, and Elena watched relief crash across his features, raw and unguarded in a way she'd never seen before. Elena. He dismissed everyone with a gesture, waiting until they'd disappeared before closing the distance between them. His hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the tension radiating through him. Are you all right? Chen said Kozlov's people tried to breach the gates. I'm fine. They didn't get close. Elena covered his hands with hers. Are you all right? I'm perfect now. Victor's thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. It's over. Kozlov's operation is finished. His warehouses are empty. His accounts are frozen. His key people are either arrested or running. He's got nothing left. And Kozlov himself? In federal custody as of 30 minutes ago. Turns out when you provide authorities with detailed evidence of trafficking and drug operations, they move very quickly. Victor's smile was sharp. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. He'll never threaten you again. Elena should ask about the methods Victor had used, the lines he'd crossed, the people who'd been hurt in the process of neutralizing the threat. But standing here with his hands gentle on her face and relief making him look younger, she found she didn't care about the ugly details. You changed your entire strategy because of me, she said quietly. Of course I did. You're more important than strategy. Victor said it like it was obvious, like he hadn't just admitted something that made Elena's heart stutter. I would have waited, played it safer, minimized risk. But the moment he targeted you, all of that became irrelevant. Nothing matters more than keeping you safe. Victor, I need to tell you something. His voice was rough, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. And I need to tell you before I lose my nerve or convince myself it's smarter to keep it inside. Elena's pulse was racing. Okay. This arrangement was supposed to be a transaction, business, a marriage in name only that benefited us both and required nothing more than professional courtesy. Victor's hands trembled slightly against her face. But somewhere in the past 2 months, you became the most important person in my life. And tonight, when I knew Kozlov was targeting you, I realized I would burn down the entire city if that's what it took to keep you safe. That's slightly terrifying, Elena whispered. I know. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Victor's expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I'm in love with you, Elena. Completely, irrevocably, in a way that probably violates every smart decision I should be making. And I understand if you don't feel the same way. I understand this started wrong, and you have every reason to keep your distance. But I needed you to know that you're not just my wife on paper anymore. You're everything. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. You're an idiot. Victor's face fell. I know, I shouldn't have said anything. No, you're an idiot because I've been in love with you for weeks and trying not to be. Elena laughed, the sound half-sob. I've been fighting it so hard because this was supposed to be temporary, and falling for you felt like the stupidest possible mistake. But tonight, when Chen told me Kozlov was targeting me and you were out there fighting to protect me, I realized I'd already made that mistake. I love you, Victor, even though it's insane and complicated and started completely wrong. Victor stared at her like he couldn't quite process what she was saying. Then he kissed her. It wasn't like their wedding kiss, brief and careful and more symbol than substance. This was desperate and deep, 2 months of tension and denial and careful distance finally breaking apart. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Victor lifted her off her feet, backing her against the wall without breaking the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. I was so afraid, he admitted quietly. When I heard Kozlov was targeting you, I was more afraid than I've ever been in my life. Not for myself, not for the business, but for you. For losing you before I'd even had the chance to… You're not losing me. Elena's fingers threaded through his hair. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. Even though I'm a criminal who just destroyed a rival organization? Even though, especially though… Elena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I know who you are, Victor. I've seen the files, watched you operate, understand exactly what you're capable of, and I love you anyway. Maybe I love you because of it. Because you're brutal when necessary, but never cruel. Because you protect the vulnerable even while running operations in gray spaces. Because you gave me power instead of trying to take mine away. Victor kissed her again, softer this time. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you've got me anyway. Elena smiled against his mouth. So what happens now? Now? Victor's expression turned serious. Now I ask if you want to renegotiate our arrangement. What kind of renegotiation? The kind where we stop pretending this is temporary, where we turn this marriage into something real, not because of contracts or debt or strategy, but because we choose it. Victor's hands framed her face again. I know you agreed to 3 years minimum, but I'm asking if you'll consider forever instead. Elena's breath caught. You want to stay married? Actually married? I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to watch you become the brilliant therapist I know you'll be. I want to build something with you that has nothing to do with the arrangement your father forced us into and everything to do with the partnership we've created. Victor's voice was steady, but his eyes showed vulnerability. But only if that's what you want too. If you still want to leave in 3 years, I'll honor the prenup. You'll get your money, your freedom, everything I promised. I won't try to keep you if you want to go. Elena thought about the girl she'd been 2 months ago, angry, trapped, convinced she was being sold to a monster. She thought about the woman she'd become, stronger, smarter, capable of standing beside a dangerous man and holding her own. She thought about Victor's honesty, his care, his willingness to destroy anyone who threatened her while simultaneously giving her every tool she needed to leave him if she chose to. I don't want to leave, she said clearly. I want to stay. Not because of money or contracts, but because I love you, and I want to build a life with you. Victor's smile was incandescent. You're sure? Because once you agree, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I'm sure. Elena kissed him to prove it. Though I do have conditions for this renegotiation. Name them. First, I want to be an actual partner in your operations. Not just the legitimate businesses, but understanding all of it. If I'm staying fully informed. Agreed. You've already proven you can handle the information responsibly. Second, I want us to start a foundation. Something that helps kids who've lost parents, gives them resources and counseling and support. We use your money to do something genuinely good. Victor's expression softened. I love that idea. Consider it done. What else? Third, no more separate wings. I want to share a bedroom with my husband. Elena's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. The actual marriage part of this marriage. If we're doing this for real, I don't want careful distance anymore. Elena, Victor's voice was rough. Are you sure? I don't want to rush you. I'm sure. I've been sure for weeks. I was just waiting for you to figure out we were more than a business arrangement. Elena's smile was teasing. Took you long enough. I'm a slow learner when it comes to emotions. Give me financial strategy or criminal operations and I'm brilliant. Give me feelings and I'm apparently an idiot. Victor lifted her easily, making Elena laugh. But I'm a fast learner once I figure things out. Come on. Where are we going? To the West Wing, to our bedroom. Victor's grin was wolfish. You said you wanted the actual marriage part of this marriage. I'm simply accommodating my wife's very reasonable request. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her through the mansion, past staff who smiled knowingly and pretended not to notice their boss carrying his wife toward his private quarters with clear intent. The West Wing was as beautiful as the East, but warmer somehow. Less guest quarters, more lived-in space. Victor's bedroom was massive. Dark furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, a bed that could comfortably fit 4 people. He set Elena down gently, his hands moving to her waist but going no further without permission. We can wait if you want, he said seriously. We have forever now. There's no rush. Elena answered by kissing him, by letting her hands explore the muscles of his back, by pressing closer until there was no space left between them. What happened next was tender and passionate and occasionally fumbling as they learned each other properly for the first time. Victor was patient, attentive, making sure Elena was comfortable and ready at every step. And when they finally came together, it felt like the final piece of something clicking into place. Not just physical intimacy, but genuine union between 2 people who'd chosen each other despite impossible circumstances. Afterward, Elena lay with her head on Victor's chest, his arms wrapped around her, both of them quiet and content in the darkness. I love you, Victor murmured into her hair. I'm going to say it constantly now that I'm allowed to. Good. I love you too. Elena traced patterns on his skin. Victor? What are we going to tell people about the change in our arrangement? The truth. That our marriage started as business and became real because we fell in love. Victor's fingers ran through her hair. People will believe it or they won't. I don't particularly care what people think. Not very concerned with your reputation for someone who married me for legitimacy. I have legitimacy now. I have you. Victor pulled her closer. Everything else is just details. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Elena woke in the morning to sunshine streaming through unfamiliar windows and Victor's arm heavy across her waist, she felt more at home than she had anywhere in years. The next week settled into a new rhythm. Elena moved her things to the West Wing, though she kept the East Wing library as her study space. She continued her classes at Columbia, now with security that was obvious but unobtrusive. She and Victor had dinner together every night, talking about her coursework and his business operations with equal interest. And they started the foundation. Elena threw herself into planning, working with attorneys and nonprofit experts to create an organization that would actually help grieving children instead of just being a tax write-off. Victor provided funding and connections, but he let Elena drive the vision, recognizing this was her dream brought to life. 3 months after the Kozlov situation resolved, Elena sat in Catherine Walsh's office, signing papers that officially terminated her original prenuptial agreement and replaced it with something simpler. You're sure about this? Catherine asked. The new agreement is far less protective financially. If this marriage fails, it won't. Elena signed her name with confidence. And if it somehow does, I'll deal with the consequences. But I'm not entering my real marriage with exit strategies mapped out. That's not how this works. Catherine studied her client with something like pride. You've changed since I first met you. Stronger, more certain. I had good teachers. Elena thought about Victor's lessons in standing firm, in recognizing her own worth, in refusing to be diminished by circumstances. And I had someone who believed I could be strong before I believed it myself. When Elena returned to the estate, she found chaos in the front hall. Staff members were decorating, flowers everywhere, ribbons and lights being strung, furniture being rearranged. What's happening? Elena asked Chen. Boss's orders said we're throwing a party. Chen's expression suggested he found this as surprising as Elena did. Celebration of some kind. He's been secretive about the details. Elena found Victor in his study, looking over what appeared to be catering menus. Want to tell me why our house looks like we're hosting a wedding? She asked. Victor looked up with a smile. Because we are. Ours. The real one. Elena's breath caught. What? Our first wedding was a transaction, beautiful but fundamentally hollow because neither of us had chosen it. Victor stood and rounded his desk, taking Elena's hands. I want to do it again, properly this time. With vows, we write ourselves and guests we actually want there, and a celebration of the fact that we chose each other. Victor, we're already married. Legally, yes. But I want to marry you for real, Elena. I want to stand in front of people we care about and promise you forever because I mean it, not because a contract requires it. His dark eyes were soft. Will you marry me again? Actually marry me this time? Elena felt tears gathering. You're ridiculous. Is that a yes? Of course it's a yes. Elena kissed him hard. When? 2 weeks. Small ceremony, just people who matter. Unless you want something bigger? No, small is perfect. Elena laughed through her tears. I can't believe you planned a wedding without telling me. I planned the logistics. You get to make all the actual decisions. Flowers, food, music, everything. I just wanted to surprise you with the idea. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Elena chose simple decorations, elegant food, a dress that made her feel beautiful instead of costumed. She invited Diane, a few friends from Columbia, Catherine Walsh, who'd become more friend than attorney. Victor invited Chen, Judge Margaret Chen, and a handful of people from his organization who'd proven loyal and trustworthy over the years. The ceremony took place in the same garden where they'd first married, but everything felt different. The vows Victor spoke were his own words, unscripted and raw. Elena, you walked into my life because circumstances forced you here. But you stayed because we built something worth staying for. You made me better, kinder, more honest, more willing to be vulnerable. You took a transaction and transformed it into the most important relationship of my life. I promise to spend the rest of my days earning the choice you made to stay. I promise to protect you, challenge you, support your dreams, and love you with everything I am. This is my vow, freely given. Elena's own vows came through tears. Victor, you gave me power when I felt powerless. You saw strength in me before I saw it in myself. You could have kept me trapped, but instead you gave me every tool I needed to leave, and then made me want to stay. I choose you, not because of contracts or circumstances, but because you're the best partner I could imagine. I promise to stand beside you, to challenge you when you need it, to love you even when you're being impossible. This is my choice, freely made. When Judge Chen pronounced them married this time, the kiss was different, full of certainty instead of careful distance, promise instead of performance. The celebration afterward was warm and genuine. Diane cried happy tears and told Elena her mother would be proud. Chen made a surprisingly heartfelt toast about watching his boss transform from a strategist into someone capable of actual love. Catherine presented them with the new prenuptial agreement, now officially filed and replaced with something that reflected an actual marriage instead of a business arrangement. Late in the evening, Elena found her father standing near the garden's edge, looking uncomfortable among the celebration. She hadn't invited Marcus, hadn't spoken to him since the first wedding, but Victor had extended an invitation without telling her, and Marcus had come. Elena. Marcus looked older, smaller somehow. Thank you for letting me be here. I didn't. Victor invited you. Elena's voice was cool, but not cruel. I know. He called me last week, said you were getting married again, said I should be here to see my daughter choose happiness instead of just accept circumstances. Marcus's eyes were red-rimmed. I don't deserve his kindness. Or yours. Elena studied her father, this broken man who'd sold her to save himself, who'd been drinking less according to Diane, who'd been trying to put his life back together even though the damage was already done. No, you don't, Elena agreed. But Victor's right about one thing. This wedding is different because I chose it, and part of moving forward is deciding what pieces of my past I want to keep. And? Marcus's voice was small. Do you want to keep me? Elena considered. She could cut him off completely, refuse to ever speak to him again. She'd have every right. But she thought about the foundation she was building, about helping kids process grief and trauma, thought about Victor's lessons in choosing strength over bitterness. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'm willing to find out. If you get help for your gambling, if you actually work on being someone I can trust again, maybe we can rebuild something. It won't be what we had before, but it could be something. Marcus's relief was palpable. I'll do whatever it takes, I promise. Don't promise me. Prove it. Elena gestured toward the party. You can stay for the celebration, but after tonight, if you want a relationship with me, you'll need to earn it one day at a time. She left him there and returned to Victor, who was watching with a carefully neutral expression. "You invited my father," Elena said. "I did. I'm sorry if that was overstepping, but I thought you might regret it later if you didn't at least have the option of seeing him." Victor pulled her close. "Are you angry?" "No, you were right." Elena rested her head against his chest. "I'm not ready to forgive him yet. Maybe I never will be. But I needed to see that he's trying, needed to make my own choice about whether to give him a chance." "And what did you choose?" "I chose to leave the door open, not wide open, but not completely closed either." Elena looked up at Victor. "You've taught me that people can change if they actually try, that becoming better than your worst moments is possible. I should at least give him the chance to prove whether he can." Victor kissed her forehead. "You're a better person than I am." "No, I'm just a person who's learning that strength includes knowing when to be merciful." Elena smiled. "You taught me that too. The files about the people you saved after killing their abusers. You showed me that justice and mercy can coexist." They danced as the sun set over the garden, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them, celebrating a marriage that had started wrong and become right through choice and effort and unexpected love. Later, alone in their bedroom, Victor pulled Elena close and murmured against her hair, "No regrets?" "None." "You?" "Only that I didn't realize I loved you sooner. We wasted weeks being careful when we could have been together." Victor's hands traced patterns on her skin. "But I suppose the careful period was necessary. We needed to build trust before we could build everything else." Very philosophical for someone who claims not to understand emotions. "I'm learning. You're an excellent teacher." Victor pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I have something for you, a wedding gift." "Victor, you've given me everything already. Not this." He retrieved a folder from his nightstand and handed it to her. "Open it." Inside were legal documents establishing the foundation Elena had designed, but not in her name alone, in both their names, with Victor listed as co-founder and equal partner. "I know you wanted this to be your project," Victor said quietly, "but I want to build it with you. Want to be part of helping these kids, using the resources I've accumulated for something genuinely good. If you'll let me be your partner in this too." Elena felt her eyes burning. "Of course. I'd love that." "Good. Because I've already started reaching out to experts in child psychology, trauma counseling, grief support. We have meetings scheduled next month to start building the actual programs." Victor's expression was soft. "Your dream of helping people who've lost parents the way you lost your mother. I want to help make that real." They made love again that night, tender and intense. Two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and built something precious from the wreckage. 6 months later, Elena stood in the Foundation's new headquarters, a beautiful building in the city, designed specifically for children who needed support and resources after losing parents. Counseling rooms decorated to feel safe rather than clinical. Play therapy spaces filled with art supplies and toys. A library stocked with books about grief and healing. Everything she'd envisioned and more brought to life by Victor's funding and her vision working in tandem. "It's perfect," Diane said, touring the facility with Elena. "Your mother would be so proud." "I hope so." Elena watched through the window as the first group of children arrived for the pilot program. "Victor keeps saying I should be proud of myself, but it still feels surreal that this exists." "That's because you're used to surviving instead of thriving. You're going to need to adjust your expectations of what you're capable of." Diane squeezed Elena's hand. "You've built something beautiful here, sweetheart. You and Victor both." Victor appeared in the doorway, still in his suit from a morning meeting. He'd been splitting his time between running his operations and helping Elena launch the foundation, somehow managing both without seeming overwhelmed. "The mayor's here," he said. "Ready for the ribbon cutting?" Elena took a breath. This was it, the official opening, the moment her dream became fully real. "Ready," she said. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Elena gave a speech about losing her mother and wanting to help other children navigate that same grief. Victor stood beside her, his hand at the small of her back, his presence steady and supportive. When Elena cut the ribbon and officially opened the Romano Foundation for Grieving Children, the applause felt like validation. Afterward, as staff began working with the first children who'd come for counseling and support, Victor pulled Elena aside. "You did it," he said quietly. "You took pain and transformed it into help for others. That's extraordinary. We did it, Elena corrected. I couldn't have built this without you. Maybe, but the vision was yours. I just provided resources. Victor kissed her temple. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. Elena leaned into him. We've built something good together. Multiple things, actually. Over the next year, Elena completed her master's degree with honors. She started working part-time at the foundation, providing counseling to children while managing the organization's growth. Victor continued transforming his business operations, moving more resources into legitimate enterprises while maintaining enough edge to stay relevant in the world he operated in. They became a true partnership, Elena gradually taking on more involvement in Victor's operations, providing perspective and counsel that proved invaluable. Victor supporting Elena's work with the foundation, using his connections to expand their reach and help more children. And through it all, they fell more deeply in love. Not the desperate intensity of those first weeks of realization, but something steadier and more enduring. The kind of love built on respect, trust, and genuine partnership. On their one-year anniversary of the second wedding, the real wedding, as they called it, Elena and Victor sat in their garden watching the sunset. Do you ever regret it? Victor asked quietly. The way we started? Your father selling you to pay his debts? Elena considered. A year ago, even 6 months ago, the answer would have been complicated. Now it was simple. No. Because yes, I was sold like property. Yes, I had no choice. But every single day since then, I've chosen you. Chosen us. And those choices matter more than the circumstances that brought us together. She turned to face him. You gave me back my agency, Victor. You could have kept me trapped, but instead you gave me power and independence and the freedom to leave. And then you made me want to stay. Best decision I ever made, Victor murmured. Giving you the tools to leave meant that when you chose to stay, I knew it was real. It's real. Elena kissed him softly. More real than anything I've ever known. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing overhead. Two people who'd been strangers forced into marriage and had somehow built something genuine from coercion. Elena thought about the girl she'd been at 20, scared, angry, convinced she was being destroyed. She thought about the woman she'd become at 22, strong, certain, capable of standing beside a dangerous man and holding her own. She thought about Victor, who transformed from the man who bought her into the partner who loved her, who'd given her everything he promised, and more besides, who made her laugh and challenged her thinking and supported her dreams while building their life together. What are you thinking? Victor asked. That we're a good team, Elena said. That I'm glad your father's debt brought me to you, even though I hated it at the time. That sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the best futures if you're brave enough to build something from the wreckage. Very philosophical. I learned from the best. Elena smiled. You've made me stronger, Victor. Made me someone I'm proud to be. You did that yourself. I just provided the environment where you could discover who you already were. Victor pulled her closer. Though I'll take credit for recognizing your potential before you did. Always so modest. Well, always so honest, Victor corrected. Which reminds me, I have something to tell you. Should I be worried? No, the opposite, actually. Victor's hand moved to rest on Elena's stomach. I've been thinking about the future, about what we might want to build next. Elena's breath caught. They'd talked about children in abstract terms, but never seriously, never with the sense that it might be imminent. And, she prompted, and I think I'd like to be a father someday. If you want to be a mother, no pressure, he added quickly. I know you're focused on the foundation in your career, but I wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd love to have children with you. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. I'd like that too. Not yet, maybe. But someday. Someday is perfect. Victor kissed her thoroughly. We have forever, after all. No rush. They did have forever, Elena thought, not because a contract said so, but because they'd chosen it, had taken a transaction disguised as a celebration and transformed it into something real and lasting and true. The girl who'd been sold had disappeared. In her place stood a woman who'd chosen power, love, and control on her own terms, who'd partnered with a dangerous man and helped transform him into someone capable of genuine goodness alongside the necessary ruthlessness. Their empire was stabilized, their bond was unbreakable, and Elena was no longer trapped. She was reigning, not as a victim who'd survived, but as a queen who'd conquered, first herself, then her circumstances. And finally, the heart of a man who'd thought himself incapable of love. It was an ending that was really a beginning. The start of forever for two people who'd been forced together and stayed by choice. Who'd built something extraordinary from impossible circumstances. Who'd proven that sometimes love chose you before you chose it, and that the bravest thing you could do was choose it back.